Chapter 307. It's really uncomfortable if I don't dodge. Fujio sighed. Sure enough, she couldn't win against the Almighty. Chinamo didn't listen to the youngster and put the second drop on his right eye. Fujio couldn't dodge and got stung. It hurts, but it works, Chinamo said as he rubbed the youngster's head. Fujio agreed. She didn't want to make things difficult for the Almighty. After all, he was not good at comforting people. Chinamo didn't want to see the youngster like this. He secretly decided to let the youngster eat more things to brighten his eyes. That way, he wouldn't look as listless as he was now. The third drop was on his left eye. It wasn't serious, so one drop was enough. Then the eye ointment, which wasn't easy to buy in Tokyo. After the ointment was applied, the eyes would be completely covered. It was sticky. Fujio wanted to open her eyes and look at the lights. Close your eyes and rest. Chinmo's voice was calm, and his fingers were still rubbing the corners of Fujio's eyes. It would make her feel better. But Fujio's profession made her naturally more vigilant than others. She couldn't see the other person's situation clearly. This was something she had never experienced before. Especially when she was a hacker, she liked to see all the situations in her eyes. This was one of the reasons why she could escape unscathed all these years. Except for Hoshino, she had never seen anyone. And she never trusted anyone. But ever since she was reborn, she seemed to be different from before. How should she put it? More down to earth? But this boundless darkness still made Fujio feel a little uncertain. She could still smell the faint scent of tobacco in her breath. It came from the Almighty. This was the only information Fujio could use to determine where the Almighty was. Her heart seemed to be disturbed. Fujio tried not to touch the person so close to her. If the Almighty misunderstood that she was flirting with him, it would be the worst thing to do. And she couldn't see the Almighty's eyes. She would feel that her identity was not safe. Because she wasn't sure what the Almighty would see in this gap. So she couldn't let her guard down. Nervous. A deep and graceful voice came from beside her. Fujio smiled. Why would I? His back is tense. If he's not nervous, then what is? Fujio only felt that someone had touched her head. He heard the Almighty say in a low voice, "Did you forget again? Big Brother is a psychology major." Fujio simply admitted, "All right, I'm very nervous. It's too uncomfortable not being able to see." Chinemo lowered his lids and looked at the youngster in front of him who was complaining to him. His lips curled up, probably because he found it interesting. "Brother Emo, are you smiling now?" Fujio tilted her head and moved her ears. Chinemo nodded faintly. He really didn't hide it at all. Fujio felt that people who studied psychology were all chat killers. Just when she was feeling more and more uneasy, she felt a finger touching her ear. It was slightly cold and made her want to hide. However, she was forced back by him. It was an earphone. How do I give her headphones? Chinemo looked at the youngster's confused expression. He pressed the play button with his porcelain fingers and turned the volume to the maximum. Through the earphones, the pleasant sound of music broke through the darkness. A baritone voice that was neither too high nor too low reverberated in their ears. It was Isan Chan's song, which was very suitable for easing one's mood. Words for the readers. This sentence had to be written in the main text. Even if it was charged in the future, it wouldn't be charged. Originally, he wanted to update it at 6, but he received news that Tanyuan Creations was a website, was suspected of plagiarizing. School hunk again. Chapter 308. After going through so many people, I have to appreciate it even if I don't like it. I am a silent existence, not your world, only your shoulder. When she heard the warm lyrics, Fujio's heart softened all of a sudden, and even her back relaxed a lot. Because the Almighty was so powerful, she was always on her guard when facing him. Unlike when she was facing Baby Feng and Yao Yao, she had no scruples. The Almighty must have sensed it, so after being rejected by her, he had that kind of expression and back view. But in fact, every time the Almighty did it, he was protecting her. Although all of this was because the Almighty really thought that she was a man and treated her like his own little brother. But how many years had it been since she had tasted the feeling of being protected? And how many people would treat her so well? Not many people. The main thing was that the Almighty just looked at her, and he didn't doubt her. Fujio had always been happy about this. Fujio couldn't explain it, but she felt that this was a good state. In order to make her not nervous, he put earphones in and let her listen to music. Only the Almighty would think of such a way to pamper someone. Perhaps it had something to do with the Almighty's background. Although he was usually indifferent and domineering, he had a good upbringing, so it was always comfortable to get along with him. At that moment, all the noise in the world seemed to stop. In the darkness, Fujio could only smell the familiar peppermint scent. The light scent of a man was the same as the smell in the room, and there was a hint of tobacco in the silence. Tolerance could make people feel at ease. That was why people who studied psychology were really hard to deal with. Because when the Almighty was gentle to someone, he would use everything he had learned. After all, from a psychological point of view, music could make people lower their guard. Fujio smiled. Based on his scent, she determined Shinmo's direction and lifted her legs to stand up. But she lost her balance and fell forward headfirst. Shinmo was standing in front of the youngster. He was one step ahead of Fujio, and he held Fujio's hand. Because of the eye ointment, Fujio still had her eyes closed and couldn't open them. She simply raised her head and smiled in place of her gratitude. She didn't know how lethal she would be in this form. Shinmo stood there, looking at the youngster's porcelain-like fair and handsome face. The delicacy under his fingertips made him unable to move his fingers away. He held onto the youngster just like that. His strong features seemed to blend in with the light in the room. Fujio closed her eyes, so she didn't see Shinmo's face at all. Shinmo's state was completely unlike his usual self. If he had to find a word to describe it, it would be somewhat out of control. The deepness in his deep eyes made him look like a vampire aristocrat living in the 19th century, arrogant and indifferent, yet appropriate and alienating. But when he gazed at the young man's lips, his pupils were as dark as ink, and there was a kind of soul-stealing attraction. His face was even more handsome. Under the light, it was like diamonds had shattered in his deep eyes. Shinmo could feel that his heartbeat was different from usual. He did not know if it had become faster or slower. Chapter 309. Shinmo lowered his eyes, and his eyelashes fluttered down quietly. His side profile was breathtakingly handsome. Fujio raised her head, and it was a beautiful picture. However, Fujio felt that the Almighty was getting closer to her, and his aura seemed to be rising as well. Even their breaths seemed to be entangled with each other. Was it her illusion? Fujio tilted her head and was a little confused. Brother Emo? The sudden voice abruptly broke all the ripples between the two of them. As though someone had pressed the pause button, Shinmo suddenly stopped what he was doing. Their lips were only 3 centimeters apart. When the breath touched his face, Shinmo suddenly woke up, and even his eyes were a little shaky. This had never happened before. Was he crazy? He must be crazy. Shinmo pulled himself away and strode out of the room. Even his footsteps sounded like the wind. Fujio didn't understand. Why did she feel that the Almighty's aura had changed all of a sudden? And he even went out? Fujio wanted to open her eyes, but her vision was still blurred by the ointment. She couldn't even see Shinmo's expression clearly. What was going on? Fujio couldn't figure it out. She stood up and walked into the bathroom with her sense of direction that she had accumulated over the years. Anyway, she wanted to wash the ointment off her eyes first. It was too unhygienic to use her hands. Then she would go out to find the Almighty. At this moment, Shinmo was only wearing a pure white shirt and black trousers. He didn't wear any underwear, and he looked very young. In fact, Shinmo didn't go far. After he walked out of the room, his eyes gradually calmed down, and he directly leaned against the wall outside the room. His sexy and beautiful thin lips couldn't help but spit out a word, F***ck. He wanted to smoke, but he knew he couldn't do it here. He simply pulled his collar open. Coupled with his words, he always gave people the feeling that he was a hooligan when he was extremely handsome. There were always 2 complicated traits in Shinmo. It was just that after so many years, there was nothing that could release this other side of him. But compared to the suit he wore in the company, he seemed to be more suitable for the current look. dark, luxurious, and unrestrained. Only when he was like this could people feel that he was also a young master. Moreover, he was an existence with a red root. The nobility of his body didn't diminish in the slightest, especially his face. When he looked like this, it was especially attractive. The people in the courtyard had all said that this was clearly a master of thousands of flowers. But no one knew what he was thinking. A passing beauty saw Chin Mo leaning against the wall. He wanted to go up and strike up a conversation. That beauty smiled sweetly. She had come to the hotel with her friends. Because it was the best hotel, there were entertainment venues in the hotel. Rich people would always bring people into their rooms after they were tired of playing. Chin Mo had seen this kind of thing many times. So when one of the beauties walked over, he didn't find it strange at all. However, it was obvious that the beauty overestimated her charm. She smiled gently and said, "Handsome, do you want to go down and play with me?" Chin Mo didn't bother with her. His face was filled with coldness and indifference. Chapter 310. Chin Mo maintained his previous posture. His head was tilted, and he didn't even look at the woman. He smiled coldly and was about to speak. At this moment, there was a cracking sound. The door of the room was opened. After washing her eyes, Fujio came out and saw the Almighty leaning against the wall, as well as a fashionably dressed beauty in front of the Almighty. She had a hot body, and her eyes looked a little flirtatious. Fujio paused. What was going on? The person on the phone who seemed to be his girlfriend? No, it doesn't look like it. Based on her understanding of the Almighty didn't like to dress too hotly, right? However, that was not necessarily the case. After all, men looked at women based on their figures. But Fujio still had the basic analytical ability. For example, based on the woman's aura, it was obvious that she had drunk alcohol and was slightly tipsy. The meaning in his eyes was also very clear, as if he was asking the Almighty, "Are you sleeping?" Although Fujio was a high school student now, she wasn't that young. Therefore, his reaction to this kind of thing was not very big. Instead, he met the Almighty's gaze and smirked. With one hand in his pocket, he raised his eyebrows. It was as if he was asking, "What's going on?" Chin Mo looked at the youngster's nonchalant expression and knew that he didn't care much about such things. If it was in the past, put it on someone else. His indifference was a sign of him adapting to the circumstances. After all, he didn't like it when some people saw something and assumed it to be that way. But now, Chin Mo felt a tightness in his chest, his gaze turning cold. Fujio was even more confused now. Could it be a girl hitting on him? The Almighty wants to agree? That should not be possible. The two equally handsome men stared at each other. It was as if the beauty beside him did not exist. The girl who tried to strike up a conversation with Chin Mo felt that ever since the youngster walked out, the man's aura had become colder. Even the surrounding air seemed to have stagnated. What was going on? Did they quarrel? The other beauty was very happy. She ran in front of Fujio cutely. "Wow, you are so handsome." Sure enough, a handsome guy's friend is also a handsome guy. You two are together, right? Would you like to come and play with us? Fujio had one hand in her pocket. She raised her eyebrows and was about to reject him. They heard the Almighty's indifferent voice ring out. "All right." This was what Chin Mo said, but when he said this, his eyes were looking at Fujio. Just like that, the words, "go away," that were on the tip of her tongue turned into a cold, "okay," as the young man pushed open the door and walked out with a nonchalant expression. Fujio was a little surprised, and the corners of her beautiful eyes lifted up. Did she hear it wrong? The Almighty actually agreed. Could it be that she had come out at the wrong time and the Almighty had originally wanted to agree? "Ah, little handsome boy, your reaction is so cute. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you. Just go down and have a drink with me, but I can't guarantee what will happen to your friend." The girls in Tokyo were all very pleasant to hear. Fujio didn't understand what the Almighty was trying to say, but she couldn't just reject him. After all, this sort of thing was quite normal. Chapter 311. But the pretty girl beside Chin Mo blushed. She didn't expect to be able to date him. After all, Judging from the man's expression just now, it was obvious that he wasn't interested in her at all. For a moment, she thought that he would tell her to get lost. She knew it. Everything was just an illusion. Her charm was still there. Pretty girls were very confident about their looks. With this thought in mind, she glanced at the man beside her again. She looked sideways from where she was, and she could see the man's smooth jawline and thin lips. She really didn't know what it would feel like to be kissed by such a man. After all, he gave her too little of a feeling. Especially when the man raised his eyes, there was an indescribable coldness that seeped into her bones. And the noble aura he exuded was simply too handsome. Just thinking about it made her legs weak. She was so lucky. Compared to the places outside, the hotel was more formal. But the places to play were basically the same. The decorations were always magnificent and very luxurious. The lights weren't very bright, but there was a string of glass lamps hanging from the ceiling. Then there was the stage and the singers, as well as the rows of alcohol that could be seen. There were many wooden chairs under the stage, and everyone was rocking a sunflower in their hands. Of course, there was no lack of cigarettes in this kind of place. There were also girls who were dressed boldly. They wore exquisite makeup and exuded a pleasant fragrance. Their long legs were exposed and they seemed to be smiling very happily. They swayed their waists along with the music, and they looked very enchanting. The moment Chin Mo walked in, he attracted countless people's attention. It was no wonder. That kind of ascetic temperament, placed here, was like a god coming to the devil's world of lust, very attractive. Even the way the women looked at Chin Mo was ambiguous. The hunting intent from their eyes was so obvious, but when they saw that the man already had a partner, they couldn't help but show a disappointed look. Then, they saw Fujio behind Chin Mo. Compared to Chin Mo, Fujio seemed to be born in a nightclub. First of all, her silver hair was dyed, and she had an evil smile at the corner of her mouth and a black leather jacket. This made her look like the lead singer of a popular idol group, naughty and handsome. God, so cool. Which team is he from? Are you new here? Maybe he's not a celebrity, but how can he be so handsome? I think he's going to hit on her. Look, he's smiling at us. The beauties were as excited as they could be. They really wished that they were the ones accompanying the young man. However, Fujio was really obedient this time. It was just that she was born with an aura. When she was a hacker, she used it to avoid some forms of pursuit. She would always choose places with more people. For example, the subway, internet cafes, and nightclubs. Of course, nightclubs were actually one of her favorite places. There was wine, music, and edible fruit platters. Most importantly, when he was bored, he could call a group of people he didn't know to play Ronin, one of her favorite games. Fujio's identity as a hacker meant that she rarely got close to anyone. Chapter 312. Because most of the time, she would sit in her card bag and play the eyes closed werewolf game. Then, she would watch those who wanted to catch her run past her in a hurry. That feeling was very interesting. To get the perfect disguise, she had to blend into life. This was her motto as a hacker. So, Fujio was a little similar to herself in this life. She liked to go to nightclubs. But Lord Gio didn't think that Fujio used to go to nightclubs to look at handsome guys. It should be said that ordinary people went to nightclubs to look at handsome guys or girls, and to get high together. She was the only one who went to nightclubs to play intellectual games like Ronin, but this didn't affect Fujio's joy of coming to nightclubs again. Compared to being alone with the Almighty in the room, she would be discovered. It was also quite interesting to play Ronin here. It should be said that Fujio belonged to the darkness. Once she came to this kind of place, her eyes were exceptionally beautiful. When she smiled, it was as if all the lights would run into her eyes. The black earring on her left ear and the leather jacket of the same color made her look extremely fashionable. Paired with Fujio's face, it was obvious how cool she was. Chin Mo also noticed the youngster's happiness. The more he was like this, the colder his eyes became. People who belonged to the darkness, once they entered the darkness, they would never be swallowed by it. Instead, they would control the darkness and be like the light in it. Fujio was such an existence. She tilted her head, and the corners of her mouth curled up even more. She was like a handsome devil in a comic book, but she didn't have a black tuxedo or gloves. But this didn't affect her temperament. Chinmo's personality was of course good at sitting in a booth, and so was Fujio. There were soft sofas in the booths here. The decorations were all dark, but there were many diamonds inlaid on them. When the light shone in, it looked very luxurious. There were carpets on both sides of the walkway, and black dice cups were placed on the solid wood table. The two beauties sat down and ordered a dozen beers and beautiful cocktails. It was said that alcohol could liven things up. The woman sitting next to Chin-mo flipped her long hair, wanting to get closer to the man. You didn't answer me just now. Where are you from, and what do you do? How can you be so handsome? Could it be a boy group that hasn't debuted yet? In a place where the light couldn't reach, Chin-mo gently swirled the wine glass in his hand. His slender fingers held a thin minty cigarette. Through the rising smoke, only the pure white shirt he was wearing could be seen, sexy and lethal. He didn't open his mouth. His left hand froze for a moment as he stared coldly at the silver-haired youth who was chatting with the beauties nearby. In fact, Fujio didn't do anything bad. She wanted to find someone to play with. Werewolves with their eyes closed when it's dark. He had to find a few more people to form a team. Usually, it was a group of 9 people and a judge. That was 10 people, so she wasn't flirting. Chapter 3:13. Fujio didn't know what was going on here. But when she looked up, under the light, she didn't know what the Almighty had heard. His lips curled up slightly, and the coldness in his eyes deepened. Chin-mo tilted his head and glanced at the woman in front of him coldly. He knew very well that in the eyes of ordinary people, this woman was very attractive. But in his eyes, it was useless. She wasn't even a third of his brother's. It was even disgusting. Chin-mo had always been a clean person. When he saw the color of a woman's lips, he couldn't help but compare it with the youngster. But when he compared, his brows furrowed even more. Wipe it off. The woman was a little confused. What? Didn't he hear her condition? Wipe off the mess on your mouth, maybe I can accompany you. Chin-mo's words were very cold. Obviously, he didn't mean it. But the woman laughed immediately. She liked this kind of challenge. She took out a tissue and wiped it on her lips lightly. Of course, she couldn't really wipe it all off. After all, which woman would leave her face bare in front of a man she was interested in? It didn't make sense. Leaving a little bit of color would make it more attractive. Wipe it all off. It was another 5 extremely cold words. The woman paused, then she patiently wiped it again. Is this okay? Look at me, I listen to you. Chin-mo looked at the clean lips and slowly leaned over. The woman's heart was really beating fast. She had never seen a man with such a beautiful posture in front of a family member. She really couldn't control herself anymore. However, before she could lean over, the man pulled away, looked at her indifferently, and said emotionlessly, I can't kiss you anymore. The woman's face was about to split open. What did he mean? Was he playing with her? But looking at the man's face and temperament, she felt that she was drunk again. Let's have a good time. I know the rules in your industry. How much does a kiss cost? Give me a price, any price is fine. Chin-mo didn't listen to her at all. Instead, he looked back at the youngster who was walking over. Rather than saying that he couldn't kiss, he didn't even have the interest to kiss. Even disgust. But why, at that time, he couldn't control himself? Brother-mo. Of course, Fujio saw how the Almighty pulled away and how he was about to kiss her. But she didn't know why the Almighty had such a reaction. The only thing Fujio could think of was that the Almighty suddenly disliked that woman for being dirty. After all, she had seen the whole process, including the woman applying lipstick twice in a row. It was too obvious. With the Almighty's misophobia, who would want to be his girlfriend in the future? However, he seemed to be quite indulgent towards the beauty on the phone. As Fujio thought about it, she felt that she had been too nosy. What was the point of thinking so much about the Almighty? When Chin-mo heard the youngster's words, his gaze couldn't help but fall on the pale, thin lips. He knew very well what kind of lips those were. As long as he got closer, he would be able to smell the faint scent of candy. Chapter 3:14. The fashionably dressed beauty saw that the man she was talking to was only looking at the young man. He didn't even look back. She couldn't help but ask again, "Tell me, how much do I have to pay for you to be willing? I can pay for your friend too." She had never been so generous to a man before. After all, she didn't even need to ask for anything in the past. At first, Fujio thought that the Almighty was interested in this woman. Now that she heard the woman's words, she realized that the Almighty was being offered a price. She wanted to laugh. What should she do? "Pretty lady, are you sure you want to talk to my brother like this? He can't be moved by money." Fujio walked over with a light smile. Even the corners of her beautiful eyes were half-hooked. She leaned against Chinamo just like that. Her left hand hit the back of the sofa, looking like a wanton in the dark. Of course, it was also extremely cool. The girls on the opposite side all blushed. The pretty lady who was clinging to Chinamo laughed. "Little handsome, I'm giving your brother not only money, but also a bright future. You haven't debuted yet, right? If you want to be known by the public or get on a show, I can help you. But your brother won't even let me kiss him." That pretty lady glanced at Chinamo from the corner of her eyes. She seemed to be saying, "How could there be such a cold man?" Fujio leaned back and whistled. She turned around and looked at the Almighty. "Brother Mo, a kiss from you is worth the price of a show?" She wanted to tease the Almighty. After all, you all know. But who would have thought that Chinamo, with a cigarette between his fingers, seemed to have sobered up a little. Then he said in a calm voice, "Compared to someone who threatened to spend 10 million to sleep with me, a show is nothing." 10 million? That pretty lady frowned heavily. She was wondering why men were so arrogant. It turned out that her offer was too low. Who was it? So rich? 10 million to sleep with a person? Was that person crazy? Fujio successfully shut up, because the person who threatened to spend 10 million to sleep with Almighty Chin was herself. That's right, it was her. In the cafeteria, she was the one who only saw the back of young Master Chin. Fujio, why were you so infatuated? However, it had been a long time since that incident. Did she have to be the Almighty's bad name? All of Chin Mo's unhappiness faded with the youngster's downcast handsome face. Sure enough, there wasn't anything wrong with him. It was just that this kid was too good at flirting, causing him to have an illusion that he shouldn't have had in that instant. Fujio was still depressed. She was really depressed, and she didn't try to hide the expression on her face. This made things even more interesting for Chinamo. "However, if someone dares to raise the condition of 10 million yuan, I can agree to it. Let's see how he will sleep with me and not the other way around." With that said, Chinamo leaned towards Fujio. His shirt was still unbuttoned, and his breathing was deep. "What do you think, Lord Gio?" Fujio completely understood the Almighty's speech pattern. He even called her Lord Gio. Seriously? She finally understood why Baby Fang's back would stiffen whenever the Almighty called her Baby Fang. Chapter 315. That beauty really felt that the man was paying too much attention to the young man. Thinking about it again, there were other little vixens competing with her for a man. She couldn't help but clench her teeth and make up her mind. "It's just 10 million. I have it too, provided that you can make me happy, handsome. Apart from money, I can also give you more prospects." Hearing that, Chinamo just laughed in a low voice. His eyes swept over that silver head, and then he put his eyes on the wine bottle beside him. He said 2 words very coldly, "Not interested." She was rejected in front of so many people. The beauty's face turned ugly as well, especially when a few people around them laughed happily. She couldn't hide her arrogance anymore. "Aren't you celebrities out to sell yourselves? Why aren't you interested in me?" Teasing was one thing, and hearing others talk about the Almighty was another. Fujio raised her head and raised her eyebrows. "Who told you that we are celebrities? Who told you that we are out to sell ourselves? Stop pretending. Just admit it, it will be good for you." That beauty's attitude was very indifferent. Fujio chuckled and put her arm on the Almighty's shoulder. Her black leather jacket hit the dark wooden table as she leaned forward. That posture made her look like a demon. "Do you know why my brother isn't interested in you?" Fujio asked. "Do you know why my brother is not interested in you?" Because he is my mistress. I was the one who threatened to spend 10 million to sleep with him, which means that we are not short of money. Do you understand? When Fujio said that, there was a slight curve at the corner of her mouth, and the black diamonds on her ears shone with a mysterious light. It was very rebellious. If it were any other time, that beauty would definitely be mesmerized by him. But the young man's words were like a muffled thunder that struck her. She hated gay men the most. She really didn't expect to meet one in real life. After all, that man looked so perfect, how could he be gay? She didn't even think in that direction. She finally understood why that man would look at the young man like that, as if he wanted to swallow him whole. That kind of gaze was too deep, so deep that it made people feel sexy just by looking at it. She had thought that it was a characteristic of men to begin with. After all, the books said that the more abstinent and domineering a man was, the stronger his ability and needs in that aspect would be. Therefore, he would naturally emit strong hormones. Only now did she realize that the man's hormones only targeted the youth. Not only did the beauty feel that her enthusiasm had been wasted, but she had also asked a fake man out. The exquisite makeup on her face was about to crack with her anger. She clenched her hands and said, "You perverts are so disgusting." Fujio raised her eyebrows. Qin Mo's gaze turned cold. But before he could say anything, the people around him looked at the beauty with disapproving expressions. What? It's obvious that the man and the young man like each other. She's calling him disgusting because he rejected her? From the very beginning, her words have been very harsh. No matter what, we shouldn't judge anyone's sexual orientation. If you don't like it, just leave. After all, that circle is messy. I don't like it either, but I won't call it disgusting. Tokyo was more open-minded, and people were more rational in this aspect. Seeing that beauty like that, they all started discussing. That beauty had never suffered such a loss before. Her eyes turned vicious, and she stood up with her purse. Chapter 316. That beauty's name was Junko. She often came to this hotel, and she was a VIP customer. She got to know a lot of people here. She couldn't tolerate being humiliated. She had overheard the conversation between the two of them just now, and they had spoken in Chinese. It seemed that they weren't from here. Although they spoke in Japanese, it couldn't hide the fact that they were from here. Since they were from China, she would just beat them up. Anyway, they couldn't say anything. Junko walked into the darkness, and the beauty behind her was still trying to persuade her. Forget it, forget it. Let's go find someone else to play with. Don't be angry. Besides, they didn't spend your money, so there's nothing to lose. Who said there's nothing to lose? You're affecting my mood. Some people were just like that. They thought they were right even when they did something wrong. Her friend was helpless. She couldn't keep up with her, so she took her bag and went to find someone else to play with. She came here to have fun, and she couldn't control Junko. But it was a pity that those two handsome faces were wasted. She knew Junko's tricks very well, and the gangsters here were very familiar with Junko. It wouldn't be a problem to deal with those two Chinese people. Sigh. What a pity. The chatter in the card bag didn't stop. Especially after knowing that Fujio and Qin Mo were a couple. The women on the other side became even more excited. I see. I was wondering why such a handsome man would be with Junko. She probably hit on him, but the two of them look so compatible, especially the way Lil Shou is resting on Lil Attacker's shoulder. It's so cool. It makes people want to crush him. Fujio, the second time. This was the second time that she was called a girl today. Even though her movements were so aggressive, it was obvious. Hey, beauties, just look at her movements. She was such a man. What on earth was wrong with her? Speaking of which, sometimes Fujio didn't understand why the girls were so excited. In fact, gay love was the same as lesbian love. The circle was indeed messy, and there would be many problems. It wasn't as beautiful as they thought. And there were many AIDS carriers. Fujio lived on Fifth Avenue, so she knew this very well. But she respected everyone's sexual orientation, especially when there was a parade on Fifth Avenue every year. She often joined the parade and spoke up for love and democracy. However, shouldn't the Almighty thank her? After all, she was the one who forced the Almighty to retreat. With this thought in mind, Fujio turned around to ask for a reward. Who knew that the Almighty would raise his hand and pull her over? His breath landed on her face just like that. With a seductive smile, he said, "Since you're our Lord Gio's mistress, of course, I have to give Lord Gio some benefits. Lord Gio, as the mistress, where do you think I should kiss first?" Fujio frowned. The plot should not have developed this way. The Almighty was indeed abnormal. "It's here." Chin Mo stretched out his finger, and his cold fingertip touched Fujio's forehead. As he narrowed his eyes, his eyelashes cast a faint shadow on her face. "Here or here?" At the end of his sentence, Chin Mo's fingers rubbed Fujio's lips. Chapter 317. The experience of someone else's fingers lingering on her lips. Fujio had never experienced it before. That was why she was a little stunned. Chin Mo's eyes were very dark, and it was an extremely deep darkness. Very seductive. The softness between his fingers was something he had never felt before. The friction was like the prelude to a passionate kiss. The people standing at the side were all dumbfounded. At that moment, even the sound of the noisy music in his ears had faded quite a bit. Those beauties thought that this scene would end with a fierce kiss. They were even prepared to take a deep breath. Unexpectedly, in the next second, the youngster laughed. She leaned forward, and her face was very close to Chin. "Brother, I'm the one who protected you. Even if you want to kiss me, I should be the one to take the initiative." After saying that, Fujio stood up handsomely. With one hand on the sofa, she bent down and looked at Chin Mo from the side with a very beautiful posture. Her thin lips kissed the left side of Chin Mo's face near his chin. Chin Mo's pupils dilated, and he frowned subconsciously. That wasn't a kiss at all. It was more like some rich young master flirting with a beauty. Then there was a faint, proud smile. Looking at the youngster's face, Chin Mo's eyes deepened. Even though the action of his thin lips brushing across his cheek was too rough, he could still feel what it felt like. It was like being caressed by a feather. Very light, very numb, but Fujio was really happy this time. Even the Almighty's expression was different. It was obvious that he didn't expect such an action from her. But in that situation, a person like the Almighty, who didn't care about what others thought of him, might get so angry that he would kiss her. Flirting back like this was the best way to deal with it. And messing around between brothers shouldn't be a big deal. At most, the Almighty would activate his freezing skill again, and she would be the one to take the knife. But looking at the Almighty's expression, he could kiss her at any time to teach her a lesson. She had better get away first. Fujio thought about it and was about to lift her head to retreat. She didn't know why, but her wrist was suddenly pulled back by the Almighty. The Almighty's expression wasn't quite the same as usual. He didn't have the usual gentleness, but his handsome face was dark and fierce. What was going on? Fujio didn't have time to react. A loud clang was heard. Something hit Chin Mo's back and head. That noise made Fujio's eyes widen. Chin Mo lowered his lids and turned his body sideways. His arm was behind her, protecting her on the sofa. The man's black hair was already wet, and he didn't have his usual business aura. Fujio could clearly see his drooping eyelashes, which were evil and wild. That kind of environment didn't make him look the least bit disheveled. On the contrary, when he lowered his head, it gave Fujio a thrilling illusion. Fujio didn't have much reaction. She saw that the big man behind Chin Mo was still holding a wine bottle. Her eyes, which were originally harmless in front of Chin Mo, suddenly darkened. It was completely dark. This was the real her. The back of Chin Mo's head wasn't bleeding, but at that moment, he hadn't held onto the youngster. After the young man got up, without saying a word, he picked up the wine bottle beside him and smashed it at the other party. Chapter 318. This time, there was blood. Those guys didn't have time to react at all. Fujio had already kicked one of them to the ground. Her actions were ruthless, and her eyes were cold. She only kicked one person, and she didn't intend to stop at all. No one expected that the young man could be so ruthless. Junko's face turned pale as she watched from the side. She said to the people next to her, "Why are you still standing there? Hurry up." Those gangsters finally reacted, and they were about to rush over. However, before they could get half a meter away from the young man, a strong gust of wind came right at their faces. It was Chinemo. He picked up the wine bottle on the wooden table with his right hand and smashed that guy's head. His skills were even more horrifying than Fujio's. His fingers were stained with blood, but it didn't affect his temperament at all. His perfect abdominal muscles were full of smooth lines. As he waved the wine glass, the onlookers burst into exclamations. If someone was too beautiful even in a fight, then he would be really handsome. Chinemo was such a person. His tall and slender silhouette matched with his deep eyes and calm expression. Those who would fight felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts. Baka! The people who started the fight cursed in a low voice. Who the hell did Junko mess with this time? Why was he so difficult to deal with? Where was the Chinese soft-footed shrimp? When the pain came, they only felt dizzy for a while. However, the man didn't seem to pay attention to them. Compared to them, he seemed to care more about that silver-haired young man. Those people then noticed that the young man hadn't stopped since the beginning. Was he going to kick Kumamoto to death? Kumamoto was a big guy, and he had never been beaten like this before. But now, he didn't even have the strength to fight back. Even if he held his head, he couldn't resist the pain. It was too ruthless. The strength of those kicks on his body. Damn it. His back must have been injured. Stop, stop. Kumamoto was in so much pain that he almost begged. But Fujio only curled up her lips and kicked him again. Then she bent down in a very handsome posture, lifted Kumamoto up, and gave him a heavy punch. Stop? Are you dreaming? Fujio had to admit that she couldn't control herself. That was because she had never expected the Almighty to be injured. Moreover, he was injured because of her. This could not be tolerated in any way. Which hand did you use to hold the glass just now? Fujio looked at the man who was beaten to the ground by her. Her eyes wandered, and she looked like a devil that walked out of a comic book. She asked in a low voice as if there was no one else around, "Is it this one?" As she spoke, she looked at the Kumamoto's right hand. "Or this one? Oh, of course, I can also break your back. After all, you hit my brother's back, right?" When Fujio said this, her murderous aura was really strong. He wasn't the kind of person who could be easily bluffed. Instead, it was a genuine killing intent. At that moment, Kumamoto thought he was going to die. Fujio smiled and lifted her long legs again. But at that moment, an arm stretched out towards Fujio. Chapter 319. He pulled her back, covered her eyes with one hand, and pulled her into a slightly cold embrace. When the faint smell of tobacco came, the thick smell of blood in her nostrils lessened a lot. Perhaps no one expected that it would be Chinemo who stopped Fujio at this time. The man stood tall and slender, with long legs and a handsome face. His pure white shirt was stained with blood, but even so, it couldn't hide his natural aura. He was different from everyone else. If one had to describe him, it would be like a well-polished jade, completely untouchable. Especially when he covered the young man's eyes, that low and deep voice was even more so. "Do you want to kill him? Then close your eyes. It's inflamed, so it's better not to see so much blood." Hearing that, Fujio's back stiffened, and she didn't move again. She knew that the Almighty was telling her to calm down. Fujio did calm down. Her long legs touched the ground, and she didn't kick again. She seemed to have returned to normal. After all, the Almighty had an aura that made people feel at ease. That aura wasn't completely gentle. There were too many things that couldn't be put into words. But those people next to him thought that this was their chance, and they wanted to take this opportunity to sneak up on Chinemo. Chinemo was never a person to be trifled with. He pulled the youngster with one hand, raised his long legs, and kicked those people to the ground. One after another. That movement was accompanied by the wind, and it carried a sense of dominance. No one dared to take another step forward, especially when one of them was beaten half to death. They didn't dare to be rash anymore. Fujio's eyes were covered by the Almighty the whole time. She didn't see anything, but she could hear the sounds one after another. The table was completely broken, and the floor was full of glass. When the Almighty moved his hand away, someone fell to the ground, and someone was running away in panic. Junko's face was deathly pale. Seeing Fujio look at her, she shivered slightly and ran away quickly. It was too scary. Both the youngster who kept kicking people and the man who beat them couldn't get close to them. These two people were too scary. Fujio only had time to see the Almighty throw the youngster to the ground with one hand. Was this person like this even in a fight? Even if he was covered in blood, he would still give people a kind of orderly charisma? Inexplicably, Fujio felt like she had seen such skills somewhere before. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, an extremely familiar scene flashed before his eyes. Fujio felt her heart skip a beat. He didn't even bother with the escaping Junko. Instead, she glanced up at Chinamo. It was unlikely. The Almighty probably hasn't been to the Fifth Avenue, however, who could say for sure? After all, their skills were so similar. If Fujio hadn't seen it again, she would have forgotten about it. Just 3 years ago, she was almost caught by someone. She couldn't see what that person looked like because the light was too strong and blurred her vision. After she finished the last case, she thought she was safe. She blended into the crowd, changed her clothes, and even put on a wig, just like every girl going to a masquerade party. She held a purse in her hand and wore a black robe with a hat. She had a faint smile on her face and left the policeman behind beautifully. Chapter 320. The delivery truck that had been parked in front of the ball suddenly turned on its headlights. All of the light beams were like radars, all locked onto her. Just then, a person jumped out of the truck. His movements were very handsome and neat. He didn't look like a regular customer that she had met before. The person stood with his back to the light. Other than the school uniform he was wearing, she could roughly tell his age. There was nothing else. The lights were so bright that she couldn't see anything from her position. He stood there with one hand in his pocket, his voice calm. "I've heard a lot about you, 0Z. At that time, she didn't expect anyone to recognize her. Fortunately, she was wearing a long black robe, dressed as a comic villain, the Grim Reaper. The large black hat on the robe gave her a good cover. So much so that no one could see her real face, let alone see her expression. The police officers rushed out from behind the man. She heard some people asking in disbelief, "Are you sure it's her? She's a lady. Who told you that Z is a guy?" That person is a high school student, but in front of the police, he seems to be in control of the situation. But the information we received. The police wanted to say something, but the person laughed. The man chuckled. "Yes, it was your accurate intelligence that allowed Zero to roam freely for half a year." The police. Why was this Chinese person hired by F so difficult to communicate with? Was he bullying them because they didn't know how to speak? If it wasn't for the fact that the timing wasn't right, she would have liked to give that person a thumbs up, because she could clearly hear the police gnashing their teeth after the man finished speaking. However, that person was here to capture him. That was another matter altogether. She was very clear about the principle of distinguishing between friend and foe. Although she admired the other party's intelligence, using that kind of intelligence on her was a little tricky. She had never met such a difficult opponent. The moment he appeared, he intercepted her, and she didn't know when this person had come to the Fifth Avenue. However, this was the Five Great Ways after all. It was her territory. How could she let an outsider capture her just like that? It had always been her style of doing things to keep a hand in everything. She did not raise her head. Instead, she smiled and raised her right hand. "Smith, you should recognize this." Smith was the person in charge of Fifth Avenue. When he saw what Z was holding, his expression changed. "Bomb, time bomb." She smiled faintly. "That's right, it's a time bomb. How about this, since you've caught me, I'll give you a chance. This time bomb is nearby. Do you want to catch me or dismantle it? Choose one." Smith gritted his teeth. It was obvious that the safety of the personnel was the most important. "Don't listen to her. There's no bomb." That man was surprisingly calm. Her heart skipped a beat. If the police didn't fall into her trap, she wouldn't be able to get away. The man looked at her, his face blurred by the light. Chapter 321. Cold sweat broke out on Smith's forehead when he heard Z's words. It was true. Z's style of doing things was to leave a warning every time. She would also use many online platforms to tell everyone why she was doing this. Those people were all guilty of heinous crimes. But even so, doing this would be challenging their authority. So he had to catch Z and capture her alive. What should we do? Smith couldn't make up his mind. The person was insistent. She wouldn't plant a bomb here. All the records show that Z wouldn't hurt ordinary people during her operations. This time will be no exception. She's playing psychological warfare with you. Smith was in a dilemma. Although the person she hired was a psychologist. What if Z really planted a bomb here? There were so many people on Fifth Avenue. If there was an explosion, it would be over. Z was really cunning. Every time, she would blend in with the crowd and pick the most crowded places to attack. Since Mr. Smith is having a hard time deciding, I'll do something small for you to see. She knew that Hoshino was ready. She moved her finger. Bang! The sound of an explosion came from not far away. Smith's expression changed. He shouted, "Stop! Z, stop it right now. Don't be nervous. This is only the first one. There are 7 or 8 others buried nearby. Mr. Smith, I just said that you have to make a choice. Also, if you shoot randomly, you will hit a bomb, F***CKU. Smith thought of this sentence in Huaxia at that moment. He was really annoying. At that time, when she saw Smith's expression, she knew that she was about to succeed. So, she calmly put her hand behind her back and touched the magnet that was stuck to her back. How could she not have some escape tools when she was in this world? As expected, Smith's face turned green when he heard her words. He shouted, "Don't shoot." The sound of an explosion could cause panic. The crowd was no longer as calm as before. Once they heard that there were more bombs, they started to panic and wanted to escape. Taking advantage of that moment, she forcefully tore it apart. The powerful suction from the iron-sucking device caused her to fall back dozens of meters effortlessly. Her entire body was directly glued to the celebratory iron horse. It would be a lie to say that it didn't hurt, but the most important thing was to escape. Because it was obvious that the person had his eyes on her when she retreated. It was precisely because his movements were too methodical that she remembered this moment. If it weren't for her escape, he would have grabbed onto her hand with one move. In fact, at that time, he did grab her long sleeve, but the fabric was too fragile and broke. But even so, she, who had never shown her face in front of others, revealed a flaw. That was her long hair, which was exposed outside. She couldn't care less. In the midst of the chaos, she heard the police say, F***CK. Z tricked him again. There was no bomb. They were firecrackers. The sound just now was from firecrackers. At that time, she thought that there would be a lot of trouble. She didn't expect that after she came out for more than 10 days, that person had already disappeared from the fifth path. That person's identity was also quite mysterious. The reason why she called him mysterious was because even she had not found out who that person was. The only thing he knew was that the man was from Huaxia, just like him. Fujio raised her eyes again and looked at Qin Mo, whose white shirt was still stained with blood. Chapter 322. Qin Mo looked down and saw that the young man was looking at him. He didn't know what he was thinking, but his eyes were a little numb. He thought for a moment. The kid was probably scared. That's right, the Almighty thought that his little brother was scared. Maybe it was a natural protective mentality. Qin Mo had automatically ignored how ruthless Fujio was when she kicked him just now. Anyway, the young man looked dazed, and there was still a little blood on his face. He was no different from a broken kid, although he was still too handsome. But he was still dazed. Qin Mo's eyes couldn't help but warm up when he thought of this. He took out his wallet and put the compensation amount on the bar counter. Because the compensation amount was too much, the hotel bodyguards who rushed over didn't know what to do next. After all, the things on the ground weren't worth that much money. Qin Mo grabbed Fujio and walked through the noisy crowd as if there was no one else around. The lights above his head were still flashing, and the music was the kind that could make one's heart race. If it was someone else wearing a white shirt in a nightclub, you would think that he was conservative. But that person was the Almighty, and everything seemed very different. Not only was he untainted by the mud, but he also had that kind of abstinence and indifference, like a god who had fallen from heaven. The youth he was holding in his hand was extremely demonic. With a black leather jacket and silver hair, he was simply an illusion of a demon. Both of them were so good-looking, but their temperaments were different. One black and one white, which created such an impactful scene. The fujoshis in the crowd felt their hearts racing. This kind of hand-holding was so sweet. They didn't know why this man was so domineering. What did he want to do with the young man? But the fight just now was so cool. So cool that even now, when they saw Chin Mo's side profile, they couldn't believe that there was such a perfect man in the world. Hearing the gasps around her, Fu Jiu curled up her lips. It was quite interesting to be with the Almighty. Even the fight was so fun. The bodyguards didn't stop them. And there were still broken wine bottles on the ground behind them. The Almighty must have been a person who liked to pick fights in nightclubs in the past. Fu Jiu was wrong about this. Chin Mo never picked fights in Jiang City. Who would be stupid enough to pick a fight with the young master of the Chin family? Unless he wanted to die. Chin Mo also went to nightclubs because it was hard for him to fall asleep. None of the young masters from the military region dared to provoke them. Especially since everyone knew that Chin Mo didn't like people touching him. Therefore, he didn't even dare to arrange a girl for him. It wasn't like they hadn't made arrangements before. Chin Mo took a puff of his cigarette and told them to go where they should go. That was the most chaotic year in Chin Mo's life, but he didn't do anything out of line. Therefore, many people thought that young Master Chin liked men, so they kept sending young men to the private room. Chin Mo laughed. He swirled the wine in his hand, exuding an aura of gentleness. I'm a man with a handle. You want me to touch a man with a handle? Heh, I don't have that hobby. Get lost. This was what he said to the young masters in the military compound. Then he stood up and buttoned his shirt. He was the cold and inviolable young Master Chin again. It seemed like a joke, but it was filled with warning. Ever since then, no one dared to mess with Chin Mo anymore. Chapter 323. She didn't expect the Almighty to take her to the corner of the wall. He looked back and said calmly, "Are you still afraid?" Afraid? Afraid? Fu Jiu didn't react for a moment. But then she remembered her stupid performance just now. She immediately followed the Almighty's words and said, "I didn't feel anything when I kicked him, but I was a bit stunned when I saw so much blood." Chin Mo stopped in his tracks and turned to look at her. The two of them were very close, so close that it seemed like the Almighty's breath could hit her face. Just when Fu Jiu thought the Almighty had seen through her lie, she saw the man raise his hand and wipe her face. His expression was still very indifferent, like a big brother. "So don't look at the blood, the eye drops are wasted." Fu Jiu. Is that the logic? But whatever the Almighty said, it was true. Fu Jiu felt lucky that she remembered what happened just now and put on that expression. Otherwise, someone as smart as the Almighty would have treated her in a different way. After returning to the room, the Almighty really gave her another eye drop. Although the pain this time wasn't as strong as before, it was still a little painful. The difference was that after giving her the eye drop, the Almighty directly turned off the light and went back to his own bed. Don't ask why, she could still hear the sound with her eyes closed. There was always a question in her heart. According to Fu Jiu's personality, she would definitely solve it. But it wasn't realistic to directly ask, "Brother, have you been to the Fifth Avenue?" If he wasn't careful, the Almighty might notice something and expose himself. So how to ask was a skill. But, since she was already living as Fu Jiu, let bygones be bygones. At least let bygones be bygones. Because now, she had found something that was far more important than catching those who had committed the most heinous crimes, something that she should persist in. It was to let He Honghua enjoy life, be friendly to her friends, fight alongside the Almighty, and participate in the national competition. She didn't know who said it. In this world, there was no end to catching evil. Just like when there was light, there would be shadows. When we are cruel to others, it must be to protect the people important to us. If not, stealing, insulting, nitpicking, and playing tricks. The darkness that was slowly evolving would eventually become a devil. She had encountered too many cases in her past life. Do not judge the sinner by his sex, nor by his age. Even high school students could laugh proudly after bullying others in school. Even a middle school student could pretend to be pitiful after stealing something. Not to mention some adults. However, the truth is always tiring or nauseating. When you look into the abyss is watching you. This sentence was always so reasonable. In the past, Hoshino had been worried about her for a long time. He was worried that she would not be able to control herself and use other means to punish those criminals. In fact, even Fujio herself was afraid that she would become unscrupulous and get rid of whoever she wanted. Just like how she was today. It was very savage. The Almighty was really someone who knew how to stop her. Chapter 324. If the Almighty was really that person, that was even less of a problem. Because in that person's eyes, she had always been a woman. And now, she was a boy. Fujio thought about it and lay down on the bed. So, if we follow this equation, then Fujio's identity gave her great protection. She couldn't let the Almighty know that she was a girl. If the Almighty was really that person, with that person's style of doing things, he would definitely have checked on her once. Thinking about it this way, it seemed to explain why the Almighty wanted to catch her after seeing her in the game and knowing that she was a hacker. Was it just because she knew how to play games? Fujio put a question mark in her head. What if it wasn't because she was playing games, but because the Almighty suspected that she was Z? That would explain why the Almighty always set traps for her when he was talking to her. And he always looked like he was watching over her. He probably found out that Fujio hadn't been to Fifth Avenue 3 years ago, and she was still a middle school student at that time, so it was even more impossible for her to be Z. That was why being a high school student was such a good identity. The more Fujio thought about it, the more her lips curled up. Chinemo, who was lying on the other bed, didn't hear any movement. He sat up with his long legs on the ground and said in a calm voice, "Are you still afraid?" Fujio heard Chinmo's question and knew that the Almighty seemed to have misunderstood something. But at this time, if she said she wasn't afraid, she would really give herself away. She could only reply, "A little, there's always blood in front of me." She didn't like blood, and when she realized it, she realized that she had used too much strength. Fujio couldn't even imagine what would have happened if the Almighty hadn't pulled her into his arms in time and covered her eyes. Would she have crushed that person's internal organs? Fujio shook her head, as if she wanted to get rid of these emotions. It was indeed a serious matter. Who knew that the Almighty's next words would be, "If you're afraid, come and sleep." Fujio was shocked. He wasn't stunned by those words. It was the Almighty's tone that said, "Because you are my little brother, I will indulge you. No one else should even think about touching my bedding." Fujio shook her head decisively. "Brother Mo, I don't sleep well. That's all. It's fine as long as I know Brother Mo is beside me." "Sleep over there?" Hee hee, what a joke. Wasn't this asking her to walk right into a trap? But the Almighty must be coaxing her like a child again. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked her to go over and sleep with him. Unfortunately, at this moment, Chin-Mo saw the youngster as a rebellious boy trying to be brave. Chin-Mo wanted to leave the youngster some self-respect, so he turned to turn on the table lamp. Fujio couldn't open her eyes at this time, but she could still feel the gentle light. It was so strange that there was such a man in the world. Cold as ice, black-bellied, but gentle to the bone. The premise is, you have to be his younger brother. When Fujio thought of this, she couldn't help but let out a long sigh. The more it was like this, the more likely the Almighty would retaliate after finding out her secret. So, let's hurry up and finish the training. Chapter 325. The next day. The sky wasn't completely bright yet. Fujio stood in the bathroom and began to check if there was anything wrong with her. After yesterday, she became more vigilant. The door must be locked. In front of the mirror, she wrapped the bandages and put on her sweater and coat. After washing her hair, it looked even fluffier. When she opened the door, she could see the Almighty's peaceful sleeping face. His hands were on his chest, and when his eyelashes fell, she could see circles and circles of shadows. He looked like a mixed-blood aristocrat. Who did the Almighty look like this? His genes were so good. Forget it. While the Almighty was sleeping, she would take the phone and look at it for a while. She hadn't replied to Baby Feng's WeChat message from yesterday. But she didn't expect that when she got the phone, it wasn't Baby Feng's urgent call on the screen. It was his brother, Manager Feng. Manager Feng was very direct. Z, go on Weibo and post photos. Don't be like Xiao Qin. That guy's Weibo is full of weeds. Fu Jiu thought about it and replied, I don't like to post on Weibo, but I can do it for the Almighty. What do you think? Manager Feng was still at the domestic airport, planning to fly to Tokyo. After dealing with the business in Jiang City, of course, he had to go to Tokyo. This was a friendly match. Although it was a friendly match, once the country collapsed, its meaning changed completely. If they lost here, how could they have the face to attend the national competition? Manager Feng was only thinking about this, but when he saw the WeChat message, he immediately became excited. Do it for Xiao Qin? Are you sure? Yes, I have the Almighty's password before. Isn't it just the same password as the game? Fu Jiu lay back on the bed lazily with a lollipop in her mouth and a phone in her hand. Only then did she feel alive, and her interest was aroused. Manager Feng thought about it. With CEO Qin's indulgence of Spade, it shouldn't be a problem to post on Weibo, so he agreed without hesitation. Then post it with photos. Fu Jiu smiled lightly and replied, no problem. Even if she wanted to post photos, she also needed to post photos. The Almighty probably didn't like to show his face in public, but it would be a pity if Qin Mo's fans didn't enjoy the benefits of such a gorgeous sleeping face. Therefore, after Fu Jiu got out of bed, she tilted her body and took the photo from the right to the left. She used the morning light to blur Qin Mo's handsome side profile, leaving only a smooth curve that made people think of how handsome the person in the photo was just by looking at it. Of course, there was also that handsome and dignified sleeping posture. The Almighty was too clean. It was as if he had fused with the light of dawn. Fu Jiu's smiling eyes froze for a moment when she saw the photo she had taken. There was no need to ask any more. She was almost certain. The Almighty was that person from back then. Because the curve of his chin was highly similar to the memory from 3 years ago. He couldn't see the person's face clearly, so he had once asked who this person was. He immediately had the answer. However, Fu Jiu only paused for a moment. Since they had already figured it out yesterday, there was no need to be conflicted now. And one thing was, she recognized the Almighty. The Almighty didn't recognize her, which was good. Chapter 326. At this time, she had to thank Manager Feng for the follow-up measures that Almighty Qin didn't remember the password for his official Weibo account. Manager Feng changed Almighty Qin's official Weibo password to the game password. That was why Fu Jiu came up so smoothly. Of course, she had another way. As long as she took Almighty Qin's laptop, she would be able to find the preview record and use it as a starting point to crack the password. However, now that she knew that the Almighty was the person who had made her suffer a loss before, she didn't know what to do. Of course, Fu Jiu wouldn't leave any traces behind. The Almighty was so smart. He had to be on guard. But such a picture was taken. All the Qin fans exploded. Holy sh*t, what did I just see? What did I see? Early in the morning, I'm just checking in as usual and watering Almighty Qin's Weibo. I never expected Almighty Qin to post on Weibo, but what is this? Photos? Sleeping photos? Hee hee, I must be dreaming. This is the first time I've seen Almighty Qin's selfie. Oh, he's so handsome that I'm crying. Why does Almighty Qin look so inviolable even when he's asleep? I'm turning gay. The man upstairs is crazy. Count me in, I want to be gay too. Mom, my nose is bleeding. It was not only Qin fans who felt this way. Even the team members who had woken up early were stunned. One of them posted, Captain, what's wrong with you? Captain? Lin Feng scrolled through Weibo while shouting towards the bathroom, Yunhu, come out and take a look. Did Captain suffer a shock? Yunhu walked over, his upper body naked and his lower body in a pair of black pants. His manly abs were on full display, still damp. What's wrong? Look at this photo. Lin Feng raised his phone for Yun Hu to take a look while he was jealous of his figure. Yun Hu glanced up and paused. Captain, send a photo? On Weibo? Or was it a sleeping photo? *CK. Is Supreme Alliance finally using Qin Mo's beauty to fight for territory with us? This was forwarded by Hei Qi, one of the top 3 in the country. Unforgivable. Why does this have to be a world where looks are the most important? Unfair. This is really unfair. Hei Qi, also known as Fatty Hei. Seeing him speak, the crowd was amused. A clever netizen commented, "Be a good boy, Fatty. Don't mess around. You're even worse off when it comes to your figure." The dark-skinned Fatty looked at his own fat arms and his bulging beer belly, then looked at the man in the photo who could almost be photographed in a magazine. He instantly felt as if he had been dealt 10,000 blows. "Ah, big Fatty, don't be sad. Come and cry on Uncle's shoulder." Coco had always loved to play online. As soon as he heard that his captain had posted a photo on Weibo, he immediately rushed over to join in the fun. Black Fatty. Go to hell. Of course, apart from these, there was also a post that caused quite a stir. Because the person who forwarded the message was none other than Xiao Jing, the captain of the national champion team. His message was very much in line with his taciturn character. There was only a question mark. By the way, there was also Meng on Weibo. Seeing Xiao Jing's Weibo post, Qin Mo and Xiao Jing became even more excited. Almighty Xiao, just admit it. Do you only care about Almighty Qin? I couldn't help it when I saw Almighty Qin's photo of him sleeping. Not bad, this is very Almighty Xiao. Chapter 327. Yes, who took the photo? This angle, this lighting, they knew Almighty Qin didn't like to show his face, so they deliberately blurred Almighty Qin's face, leaving only that graceful arc and Almighty Qin's unique noble temperament. The appearance of such a magnificent sleeping face was so sudden that Qin Mo's fans were so excited that they forgot the most important question. Now they were reminded of it. Another wave of heated discussion came. As an 18-year-old selfie lover, I can responsibly tell the beauties that this angle is impossible to take a selfie, and the selfie stick is useless, unless it's with the help of other external forces. I think even if Almighty Qin took a selfie, he wouldn't use a selfie stick. Let me summarize what the 2 floors above said. The photo was definitely taken by someone else. So, who is this someone else? From the photo, Almighty Qin probably hasn't woken up yet. Who could be next to Almighty Qin when he was sleeping? I have something to report. Isn't the Supreme Alliance training in Tokyo now? It said that 2 people share a room, you know. According to Almighty Qin's personality, he would definitely live alone. Our Almighty Qin is very obsessed with cleanliness, everyone knows that. Maybe it's Manager Feng, that's the only answer I can think of. I don't think it's right. Would Almighty Qin open the door and let Manager Feng take a photo of his sleeping face? Almighty Qin would only smile at Manager Feng and ask him to leave, so this answer doesn't make sense. That's right. This was the reaction their captain would have. In front of their captain, Manager Feng's foxtail was especially restrained, probably because he knew he couldn't beat the captain. So, what was going on? As an internal member of the Supreme Alliance, Lin Feng also couldn't figure out who took this photo at this time. According to yesterday's room allocation, the captain did sleep alone. At this time, 8:20 in the morning, no one would dare to enter the captain's room, right? Only student Feng in the suite guessed the answer after seeing the Weibo post. The person who took this photo was very likely his idol. But why did Almighty Qin become the protagonist of everything he imagined? In his fantasy, he woke up with his idol, took a photo with him while washing his face, and posted it on Weibo. His brother's mission was to post a Weibo post every day after becoming a professional player to gain popularity. In the end, student Feng felt wronged and needed to calm down. On the other side, after Fujio posted on Weibo, she logged out and sent an OK gesture to Manager Feng. Manager Feng also saw the photo, but he didn't reply. Instead, he silently looked up at the sky covered by the haze outside Jiang City Airport. This has nothing to do with him. He was a man about to get on a plane. Little Spade, good luck. Seeing that Manager Feng didn't reply to her message, Fu Jiu thought that he had boarded the plane, so she didn't care. She got up, took a lollipop from the bedside table, and put it in her mouth. She heard that there was a mobile version of the hero. She could download it on her phone and register to level up. However, at this time, the fans on Weibo had all turned into all-round detectives. Even some of the members of the other battle teams couldn't help but send private messages to Lin Feng. Chapter 328. At this moment, Yunhu glanced at the photo on Weibo again. He took a sip of mineral water. I can roughly guess who it is. You can guess? Lin Feng jumped up in excitement, grabbing onto Yunhu's arm. Who is it? Who is it? Yunhu glanced down at his fair collarbone, frowning. Then he enlarged the photo. Take your time, there's a bright spot. Since you already know, why didn't you tell me directly? Lin Feng wanted to pull his hair again. Yunhu pulled his shirt over his head. Because I wanted to use this chance to train your slow reflexes. I can give you a hint, Captain might not have slept alone last night. When Lin Feng heard this, he knew it was impossible to get an answer from Yunhu. But Captain didn't sleep alone? So exciting! What's the bright spot? Lin Feng caressed his chin, his big round eyes looking at the photo on Weibo. Why couldn't he see any bright spot? The brightest spot was the captain himself. Even though his face wasn't very clear, it was especially well-defined under the light. That faint shadow was like an angel whose wings had been broken and was lying in the holy light, dazzling everyone's eyes. Who could see anything else? But once intelligence was involved, it was a huge problem. Lin Feng lowered his head, staring at the photo carefully. Still nothing. But even if he couldn't see it, it didn't mean that the smart MO and GOCP fans couldn't see it. Of course, there were some smart old Qin fans who weren't CP fans. Beauties, look carefully, don't you think this photo is weird? What's weird? Cut off the picture, the arrow points to the lollipop, black ring, and some eye drops on the bedside table. Let's not talk about the latter, just the lollipop and black ring. The Almighty never wears a ring. Fine, let's just say the Almighty bought one for himself when he went to Tokyo. Let's have a good half-cent lollipop. The Almighty doesn't like sweets, much less eating lollipops. Who do you think the lollipop belongs to? Someone with a tacit understanding passing by. Single dogs are fed another bowl of dog food. They don't want to talk about it so early in the morning. When they go to work, they have the same tacit understanding. Wait a minute, brothers and sisters above, why don't I understand? What do you mean? It's obvious who the lollipop belongs to. Last night, that person slept in the same room as Almighty Qin. Today, the person who took the photo is, you know. As a fan of Big Spade, I understand. Super +1. My Big Spade is being naughty again, the candy caught me off guard. Some of the younger fans still didn't understand. They still thought that Almighty Qin had shot it himself, and that he shouldn't be implicating others. Some Spade Z fans are too much. Do they have to link our Almighty Qin and Spade Z together? In fact, the first person to come up with this theory wasn't a Spade fan, but an old Qin fan. It was obvious that their Almighty had slept with Spade Z. What else was there to say? After all, they were all people who truly liked Almighty Qin and didn't want to cause trouble for him, so they ignored him. Chapter 329. Spade's fans felt uncomfortable when they saw this sentence, but after the last online incident, they calmed down a lot. Their first reaction wasn't to retort, but to ask their big sister. Sister Turtle, what should we do? Almighty Qin's fans are saying that we are binding Almighty Qin. Sister Turtle was the rational fan from before, so she said very decisively, don't do anything. After this incident, you can see that Big Spade and Almighty Qin have a very good relationship, and Almighty Qin is also very protective of Big Spade. Since this is the case, don't let some people and some words affect their relationship. I believe everyone knows who took this photo today. Today, Big Spade is giving us sweets. Since he is giving sweets, we should also be happy. Don't pay attention to this kind of person who obviously wants attention. This topic will destroy the relationship between Big Spade and Almighty Qin. Why don't we queue up and tag Big Spade and tease him? If Manager Feng, who was sitting on the plane, knew this was how things were handled, he would definitely give Sister Turtle a thumbs up. She was so prescient. Most of Spade's fans responded to the call, and only a few of them still said something that could easily cause disputes. The funniest thing was this scene. A self-proclaimed Spade fan came out and said, "Sorry, my big Spade definitely didn't think so much. Now I also realize that I have caused trouble for Chin's fans. I will explain to Spade's fans later." That person quickly replied to this Spade fan, "It's okay, dear, as long as you understand moi." Spade's fans were burning with rage. What was going on? What did my big Spade do to deserve an apology? That person was obviously a schemer. He was young, but he had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. I was a little rude just now, but let me say this first, I also like Big Spade, but some things shouldn't always be linked together. Yes, you are right. Sister Turtle saw that some people who liked Big Spade had become the other party's accomplices, so she stopped the meeting and went directly to Weibo to shout. Didn't they say that the photo was not sent by their Big Spade? When Sister Turtle reposted Chin Mo's Weibo post, she tagged Spade Z. She wrote, "Big Spade, next time you take a photo, remember to cover up. Look at you, you forgot to take your ring and lollipop. Don't leave too obvious traces." As soon as she saw this comment, the poster understood why everyone said it was Spade Z who took the photo of their almighty Chin. But since she had already said it, she could only pretend she didn't see anything. Anyway, she had already gotten the attention. The 2 or 3 little Spade fans were still confused, replying to her, "Sorry, I thought there was something wrong with you just now. Now I'll clarify with them, you're in the wrong, sorry. Thank you for clarifying the matter. As a Spade fan, I might have misunderstood you. I'm also a fan of Spade Z. I couldn't accept what you said at first, but after seeing this post, I feel that Almighty is quite righteous." Sister Turtle really wanted to ask them, what exactly did that person clarify? Where was the integrity? But she resisted. In the past, when she was writing for a website, she had encountered the same thing. Sometimes, being strong didn't mean being invincible. There were many people who had thoughts that you couldn't see through. Chapter 330. Originally, she thought that her understanding would backfire. Because in this world, there would always be people who would believe some disguised words. Her Big Spade wasn't a person who could disguise, but the other party was. So, she wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Especially when it came to protecting Spade Z. She had to be calmer and win with experience. Fortunately, she wasn't fighting alone. As soon as her it came out, a lot of people reposted her, including those who really liked Spade Z and only focused on the passion that Spade Z brought them. They used that S one after another to prove their strong and powerful existence. My Big Spade did it on purpose. Such a domineering attack would definitely leave evidence that he and Almighty Chin are sleeping together. Heck? Are you sure? Almighty Chin won't do it. I'll just wait for Almighty Chin to wake up and check Weibo. Yes, according to Almighty Chin's character, there will be 2 endings. One is to block Big Spade, the other is to sleep with Big Spade. Just like that, the scene changed again. An aura full of love spread out. That person is still posting to make his presence known? Sorry, people who really liked Spade Z wouldn't have any interaction with you. If you want to gain popularity, you can feel it yourself with a look. Lin Feng was still moved and frightened by Little Spade's success in sleeping with Captain. He turned his head and said to Yun Hu, "That's not right, it was Little Feng Shang who slept with Little Spade. How did he change to Captain? Do you think there was nothing between them last night?" According to Little Spade's character, he would definitely. Even if Little Spade had ulterior motives towards Captain, it wouldn't be a big deal. Obviously, there will be 2 situations. One is that he was beaten up by Captain and thrown out, and the other is that the person who was slept with was him, not Captain. Yun, who was indeed the best player in Supreme Alliance other than the Almighty. He hit the nail on the head with one sentence. But Little Spade is really charming. I can see that someone is protecting him. Protecting? You mean those at S from Spade fans? Lin Feng wasn't stupid. They have a good grasp of the wind direction, otherwise someone would take the opportunity to rise. After saying this, Lin Feng became excited again. Little Spade is indeed a fresh stream in our Supreme Alliance. He dared to take a photo of Captain and even used Captain's account to post on Weibo? Why could he use the Captain's account to post on Weibo? I'm sure Captain didn't post it himself, but how did Little Spade do it? You hacked Captain's system? I don't think so. Yoon Who tapped on the webpage on his phone. Our team's official Weibo isn't active, which means that Feng Yi knows about this. It's very likely that Little Spade got Feng Yi's approval before posting on Weibo. Otherwise, do you think Manager Feng, who values money as much as his life, wouldn't repost such an interactive photo? He's running away, and if the Captain finds out, he'll be held responsible. That makes sense. Lin Feng slapped his forehead. Ayaya, isn't Little Spade in trouble? I wonder how Captain will punish him. I really want to see. Achoo! Fu Jiu logged out of Hero's page and logged back into the official Weibo account. Her slender fingers rubbed her nose carelessly, and her eyes paused. She was about to look at the comments that had been at us. She heard a low chuckle coming from her left side. Why are you sneezing all of a sudden? Chapter 331. As soon as Fu Jiu turned around, she was met with a pair of deep eyes, which inexplicably gave off a hazy and inviolable feeling. Did you catch a cold yesterday, or are you feeling unwell? The Almighty was still lying on the bed, the pillow pressed against his ear. His features were as handsome as a comic book, and a few strands of black hair fell on his forehead, the ends of the hair falling on his eyelashes. Even the smell of the hotel seemed to have sublimated on him. It was light and pleasant to the nose. But it didn't look good for the Almighty to wake up at this time. She had just replied to a post by someone called Sister Turtle, and she was going to check out other edits. Well, actually, it didn't matter what they were. What mattered was her reply. I'm so handsome, of course I'm the main. She had thought that her reply would be buried among all the comments. And the Almighty might not even see it. After all, the Almighty didn't like Weibo, and he definitely wouldn't go to her official Weibo to check the replies one by one. But Fu Jiu's fingers paused, and she naturally moved her phone away. No, I'm fine. Oh! Qin Mo looked at her movements and raised his eyebrows. He lifted the quilt with his fingers and walked over slowly. Qin Mo wasn't wearing a shirt, so his seductive waistline and well-defined chest were exposed. His mermaid lines could be seen clearly, and he looked very oppressive. Fu Jiu thought that no matter how powerful the Almighty was, he wouldn't notice that she had just sent a reply. But Qin Mo bent over, leaned over, and pressed down on Fu Jiu's hand. They were very close, so close that it seemed like he was going to press her down. Secretly playing with your phone while I was sleeping? That voice was really nice, but at this moment, it made her feel that every inch of his breath that hit her ear was dangerous. What did I say? Be obedient. Qin Mo freed his other hand and tapped the corner of the youngster's eye. You don't want your eyes anymore, huh? So it was about the eye inflammation. Fu Jiu thought that the Almighty had noticed something. I want them, Brother Mo, but I have to reply to your messages, right? For example, Baby Feng sent me a message yesterday. You know that Baby Feng needs to be taken care of. Manager Feng isn't here, so I have to take care of him. If I don't reply to his WeChat for a whole night, his heart will be fragile. There was a hint of coldness in Qin Mo's eyes. You're right. Right. Fu Jiu felt that God was kind to her. She was smart and didn't reveal any flaws when facing the pressure of a god. Fu Jiu didn't reveal any flaws, but she gave such an explanation. Qin Mo didn't like it very much. Baby Feng? This form of address was quite intimate. He seemed to be very close to Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao. At the thought of Shui Yaoyao's existence, he frowned subconsciously. Even the Almighty himself didn't know his expression at that time. Of course I can't let you lose contact with others. Qin Mo's voice was calm as he took the phone from Fu Jiu's hand. What do you want to reply to him? I'll help you. Fu Jiu. No matter how smart she was, she wouldn't have expected things to turn out this way. Why did the Almighty never play by the rules? At first, Qin Mo really wanted to reply to Feng Shang, but when he took the youngster's phone he saw an eye-catching Weibo reply on the screen. Chapter 332. That's it. That was the only thought in Fujio's mind. After Chin Mo picked up his phone, time seemed to stop between the two of them. It was empty for half a second. Chin Mo lowered his eyes and looked at the youngster on the bed. The youngster was looking at him too. That face was still clean and handsome, but no matter how he looked at it, it made people want to teach him a lesson. Attack? Chin Mo arched a brow, then his thin lips curved into a smile. He remained standing by the bed, but his left hand pressed down, supporting himself on the bed. Fujio could clearly feel that the mattress had sunk a little because of the Almighty's movement. Chin Mo bent his waist and put one knee on the mattress. His legs were so long and beautiful. That handsome and noble face pressed down on her without any warning. His eyes were deep and black, like poppies in bloom, with a strong sense of abstinence. The morning sun shone on his deep and straight features, making him look even more oppressive. The two of them were so close that Fujio couldn't move at all. The Almighty was so cunning that he even cut off her escape route. This position made it seem as if her entire body was trapped under him. The light minty smoke that belonged to the man assaulted her from all directions. He just looked at her. That pair of eyes that had always been indifferent seemed to be about to attack at this moment, emitting a dangerous and beautiful luster of a predator. Since you insist on being the attack, I'll have to practice with you. Let's see who's more aggressive, you or me. As Chin Mo said this, he was about to teach this troublemaker brother a lesson. His first reaction was to strip the youngster. Chin Mo's action completely alerted Fujio. Brother Mo, I have something to say about this. Fujio took a step back, but Chin Mo held her wrist. The Almighty didn't care. Oh, you still have something to say? When we play werewolf, everyone who is thrown out has to say something before they die. Fujio looked serious. Chin Mo was interested. He wanted to hear what this naughty kid had to say. He was still talking about werewolf, so he raised his eyebrows at the youngster, signaling him to continue. Anyone who plays hero knows that offense is the best defense. Fujio leaned forward, sat up straight, and kissed him on his right cheek without any warning. Her bright eyes, coupled with her silver hair, looked handsome and devilish. I want to say, Brother Mo, it's so early in the morning. Why would I think that you're interested in me when you're pounding me on the bed like that? Am I supposed to think that you're interested in me too? I can't help but kiss you. Indeed, Chin Mo didn't expect Fujio to make such a move. His fingers paused and his mood sank. His eyes darkened like the water in a deep well. Fujio seized the opportunity to escape from the predicament. She stood with one hand in her pocket and sighed regretfully. Brother Mo, what do you think we should do? Just when I thought I was a little straighter, you turn me gay again. This is not good, not good. At this moment, Chin Mo was so angry that he laughed. His lips curled up faintly. He straightened his body and stepped on the floor barefooted, like a god descending from the heavens. Afterward. Chapter 333. The distance between them was even closer, because both of them were standing. Moreover, Chin Mo grabbed Fujio's collar and dragged her over. Following that strength and posture, Chin Mo lowered his head and leaned forward, his thin lips inching closer to Fujio. The perfect height difference was just like what the Tokyo girls said. If the two of them kissed, the scene would be very beautiful. But Chin Mo was still rational. How could he kiss her? He was just warning his disobedient younger brother, "You're so good at talking nonsense. Tell me, how should I teach you a lesson, huh? Brother Mo, do you want to hear the truth? You're the big brother, so you have to let me win." Fujio decided to change tactics. She didn't even try to dodge, and there was a slight smile on her lips. Chin Mo listened to the youngster's rascally tone and laughed instead of getting angry. You like meat? You like to play with your phone? You like to post on Weibo? The last one average. Fujio didn't have a habit of posting on Weibo, but what she said was true. Chin Mo was still holding onto her phone. He moved his fingers, letting her see for herself. Do you like to take photos? Brother Mo looks so handsome when he's sleeping. Of course I have to record such beautiful things. Fujio smiled casually. This is the first time I'm competing with so many people, and then I'm staying in a hotel room with my good friends. It's not bad to wake up like this in the morning, it'll be a memory in the future. When Chin Emo heard the youngster's words, he loosened his long fingers and tugged at the youngster. The two of them leaned back and lay down on the bed. Fu Jio did not expect the Almighty to make such a move. The Almighty's reaction was always different from what she expected. Therefore, he was caught off guard for a moment. When his whole body was lying on the soft mattress, she saw the Almighty raise his left hand, which was holding the phone, and his right hand pressed her head against his shoulder. Then there was a cracking sound. Her face and the Almighty's shoulder appeared on the screen. Fu Jio paused and tilted her head to look at the man beside her. He had never been so close to anyone before, but he was really happy. Since it's a memory, it's more meaningful to take a photo together. Chin Mo's voice was very calm, but his attitude was like he would try his best to satisfy his younger brother no matter what he wanted. In addition, he had always been very resistant to taking photos. At this moment, he actually felt that the feeling of taking a photo with another person wasn't so bad after all. It should be said that it was not bad. Chin Mo's thin lips curled up, and his side profile was so handsome that even Fu Jio wanted to whistle. The Almighty was so handsome that he didn't leave anyone a way out. This expression doesn't look good. Fu Jio took the phone over to delete it. Chin Emo reached out to stop the youngster. Your embarrassed expression is enough to make me laugh for a year. Keep it. Fu Jio, why was she so touched just now? The Almighty's purpose for memory was to watch her make a fool of herself? Then I'll take another one. She was so handsome, she couldn't lose to the Almighty. This time, Chin Emo let Fu Jio be. The two of them were still in the same position, lying on the bed. The difference was that this time, Fu Jio included the Almighty. The first time the two of them took a photo together was in bed. Only Fu Jio and Chin Emo, one was rebellious, while the other was domineering and indifferent, thought nothing of it. Ordinary people would definitely think a lot when they saw that picture. Chapter 334. So handsome. Fu Jio looked at the photo and whistled, with a devilish smile on her face. Just as she finished praising her handsomeness, the Almighty took away her phone and said in a deep voice, "Go drink your medicine." My phone. Confiscated. Chin Emo stood up and walked back to his bed, probably to find something to wear. Fu Jio's mood now was only comforting herself with good food. She also stood up and took her wallet. Brother Emo, what do you want to eat? I'll go get it. Most hotels provided free breakfast, and it was a buffet. Especially in a star-rated hotel like this, the breakfast was even better. But there was still a charge to bring the food to the room. Chin Emo buttoned up the last button on his shirt and immediately said in a businesslike manner, "Let's go together after I wash up." Fu Jio smiled, looking exceptionally handsome. Boys were different from girls. He said he was going to wash his face and rinse his mouth. Girls washing up included eyeliner, eyebrows, BB cream, and other follow-up procedures. So it was definitely different in terms of time. In less than 3 minutes, the two of them walked out of the room and went down the elevator side by side. The hotel's restaurant was located in the lobby on the second floor. Dark carpets covered the floor, and gorgeous chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Below the lights was an oval marble table, on which many colorful dishes were placed. There were Western food, Chinese food, and Japanese food. There were also fruits cut into flower shapes, which stretched down like a long dragon. In addition to these, there were also busy waiters. Because they were in Tokyo, they were also dressed as deacons. Some of them were pouring milk for the guests. They were wearing black suits and pure white gloves, which added a sense of gentleness to them. Hotel guests could choose food from here with the dining tickets in their room cards. Here, the food must be fresh. If no one came to pick it up after 10 minutes, the waiters would bring a new batch of food. Fu Jio and Chin Emo chose a distance from the floor-to-ceiling window. From this angle, they could see the most prosperous Tokyo streets outside the hotel. Their appearances naturally attracted many people's attention. In the past, Fu Jio only felt that she was handsome, so she didn't feel much about it. But now that she was with this god, it was indeed. It was mainly because the Almighty looked like a noble young master who was here for morning tea. His every move exuded nobility. Compared to the Almighty, she ate a lot. She didn't know how the Almighty's stomach worked. He only ate so little. Chinemo also wanted to ask Fujio this question. He glanced at the 3 empty plates in the youngster's hands and finally convinced himself that he was still growing in puberty. Otherwise, I really don't know where this guy puts his food. I'm not satisfied yet. Go get another plate of fried rice. Fujio stuffed one hand into her pocket. She didn't feel like she ate much at all. Brother Emo, what else do you want? I'll bring it over. Chinemo thought about it and felt that the way some parents did things was good. They let their children do more things for them. This would give them a sense of achievement, right? Black tea. Okay. Chinemo looked at the youngster's tall and straight back, then casually looked at his phone screen. Spadez's Weibo account hadn't been logged out, so it was obvious that he was tagging and commenting. It was quite interesting to watch. Chapter 335. That was a message that had been replied to many times. That was why he could see it so easily. Look here, don't put our almighty Chin and Spadez together, understand? There were actually 2 types of messages like this. First, someone didn't like being tied up. Second, they wanted to attract attention. Obviously, this person was the second type. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept replying. I was a bit impulsive just now, but let me say this first, I like Big Spade too. Whether he liked Spadez or not was another matter. After Chinemo clicked on that person's message, he only had one feeling. This person was imitating Spadez in everything and wanted to become an internet celebrity. Chinemo was a businessman. As a businessman, it was easy to see the essence through appearances. It wasn't impossible that Spadez could attract attention and wanted to spend money on him. Of course, Chinemo didn't rule out the possibility that this person might have really liked Spadez from the start. But this liking wasn't pure. First, he pretended to be a fan, then he imitated Spadez, and finally, he posted such a message to attract attention. Anyone with a brain could see what he was thinking. This reply must have been avoided by the true Spade fans through the manipulation of public opinion. But some people couldn't see through it and kept interacting with that person. Almighty, I know you are a Spadez fan too, that's why you said such words. It's to make my Big Spade better, it's okay, good luck. That person replied, I love Big Spade the most, hug. Then, a few people started replying happily. I want to touch him. I caught Almighty, I realized he is similar to my Big Spade, he speaks so righteously, I'm a fan too. The topic that had already died down was stirred up again. Those who claimed to be Spadez's fans didn't realize they had become accomplices to hurt Spadez. They said they liked him, but they were helping a person who was trying to imitate Spadez to become famous. In fact, Chinemo didn't care what this person was planning. But he didn't want his brother to see such a disgusting thing. If it wasn't good enough to guide the public opinion, he would add more. This time, Chinemo didn't post on Weibo directly. Instead, after 2 glances at the reposts, he accurately locked onto a person called Sister Turtle. Then he clicked on her nickname and sent a private message. I'll post something about someone on Weibo later. Is there a problem with it? Sister Turtle had imagined many times how their Big Spade would send her a private message on Weibo. But she didn't expect Almighty Chin to send her a private message first. Even Sister Turtle, an experienced and knowledgeable white-collar worker, almost choked on her water. However, they were all people in the workplace, so their words were straightforward. No problem. Sister Turtle didn't ask why Almighty Chin came to talk to her. Smart people would understand once they saw the things on Weibo. Just now, she was still worried that the scheming person would appear again. After all, no matter how good you were to yourself, you couldn't control the thoughts of others. Somehow, he could empathize with them. Her heart ached for Big Spade, the youth who said, justice may be late, but it is never absent. She was being hurt, but some people who said they liked her became her accomplices. This matter must be stopped. Sister Turtle heaved a sigh of relief at the Almighty's timely appearance. Chapter 336. Sister Turtle was not a fan of the CP. She also knew that there should be a deep brotherhood between esports players. Since the last incident, it could be seen that Almighty Chin was really good to their big spade. But someone called their big spade. Wasn't that too? Sister Turtle shook her head. As a professional woman, she didn't want to be like those cute high school students. She just needed to protect Big Spade. Sister Turtle thought about it and waited for the Weibo post about someone mentioned by Almighty Chin to be sent again. At this time, in a star hotel in Tokyo, Chin Mo's fingers moved, logged into his official Weibo, and posted the edited photo of the youngster. He edited a few words in a very simple tone. Both offensive and defensive are shown immediately. Sister Turtle's computer page stayed on Chin Mo's Weibo. When she saw the photo, she was completely stunned. In the photo, the silver-haired youngster looked at the camera with a smile. Even the curve of the corner of his mouth seemed to be smart and handsome. He squinted his left eye, looking very flirtatious. The black ear stud was very eye-catching. And Almighty Chin cooperated with the youngster, tilting his head down in a very domineering manner. His dark eyes seemed to be overflowing with light, and he even showed his collarbone? He was really aggressive. The two people's temperaments were completely different. In the photo, not only did it not erase their original advantages, but it also highlighted each other's nobility. They were so handsome that people just wanted to scream. But the photo also had special effects. The pair of hairy black devil ears on the top of the head was really beautiful. And they were using pillow, right? What was going on? Sister Turtle's hand holding the mouse was a little confused. Again, she really was not a fan of the CP. But if it kept going like this, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Such a photo with Almighty Chin's words was very meaningful. What was Almighty Chin doing? Even if he was giving out candy, it was not like this. His official Weibo would be blown up. It would indeed be blown up. Over there, the person who wanted to use the topic of Spade Z to become popular was still interacting with the 2 or 3 people who claimed to be Spade Z's fans, wanting others to recognize her. On this side, there was already a huge uproar. He was so handsome that the whole screen was flooded. F***CK, F***CK, is there something wrong with my eyes? Group photo? A photo of us lying on the bed? Oh, so handsome. 2 demons, so handsome, so handsome. What should I do? Previous poster, you have no hope. Didn't you see the caption that the Almighty posted? The Almighty is on the left, and Spade is on the right. I don't want to say anything else. I just want to ask the Almighty, how long will you keep giving out sweets? I'm afraid my HP will be empty and I'll have a nosebleed. My heart is beating so fast after seeing this photo. Almighty, look at the way you're looking at Big Spade, it's so obvious. A long time ago, I had a crush on an esports guru. His Weibo was always posted every year. Moreover, it was a game guide. But now, he had changed. I don't want to tell you the reason, but as a single dog, I automatically accept this bowl of dog food. I really want to run 2 laps downstairs. My most beloved male god and my second most beloved male god are finally in the same frame. This situation. I actually feel so blessed. I want to be a CP fan. Chapter 337. After Chin Mo's fan mentioned it. Only then did the others realize that, indeed, the Almighty's Weibo was filled with Big Spade's Weibo, apart from the games that he had posted before. That's right, everything was about Big Spade. And if this had happened in the past, posting photos? Hee, the Almighty even wanted to wear a black mask to cover his handsome face when he was playing. The media didn't dare to take pictures of him. But look at this. Why did the Almighty post photos? And he blocked all other voices with these 3 words in such a domineering manner. What was he trying to say? Everyone knew what he was trying to say. The Almighty didn't just say it when he said he would protect Big Spade last time. Thinking back to the reply someone had sent here, most of them understood what was going on. The Almighty is here to get revenge for Big Spade. I like this way of getting revenge. I hope the Almighty will come here more often in the future. Almighty Chin and my Big Spade are in the same frame, Seeing this, Sister Turtle reposted Chin Mo's Weibo without hesitation and tagged Fujio, Attack, receive, immediately, show, pour my big spade, you are so handsome, but you still can't attack almighty Chin. Spade's true fan saw Sister Turtle move, and he immediately followed. Attack, receive, immediately, show, touch my big spade, fight again next time? This basically depends on temperament. I firmly believe that my big spade is the attack, second only to one and above millions. Don't mess around, almighty Chin just happens to be that one person. Chin Mo's fingers slid through the Weibo page, and he looked at those Spade's true fans tagging him, and the corner of his mouth curved up. That sentence, second only to one and above millions, almighty Chin just happens to be that one person. It was inexplicably pleasing to the eye. Involuntarily, his fingertips moved and he liked it. That Spade's fan, who never thought that she would be flipped, was stunned. Almighty Chin was really closer than she thought. Wow, 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 wow. The Almighty gave me a like. The Almighty is saying that big spade is the attack. The Almighty is so black-bellied. I just want to know what my big spade can say. In the morning you said I was so handsome, so I must be the attacker. Now I'm being attacked. Fu Jiu had no idea what was going on the official Weibo account. She had a piece of hot toast in her mouth, one hand in her pocket, and the other hand was holding a tray. The food on the tray was especially sumptuous. You only eat fried rice? Chin Mo looked up from the phone screen and glanced at the youngster in front of him. The corners of Fu Jiu's mouth curled up. Her smile was as bright as the sun, and it was hard to fade. I always feel hungry, it must be because of the lack of meat. It's also possible that I'm growing. Chin Mo's fingers were still moving. Remembering that the youngster was still in puberty, he frowned. Have you felt any knee pain recently? Fu Jiu shook her head. No. Her chest would occasionally swell up, but it was true. How could she still be growing at this age? It was a little disadvantageous for her. Buy some vitamins after dinner. It's for prevention. Chin Mo was thinking about the situation he would face when he was growing up, but he didn't expect the youngster in front of him to be in a different situation. Chapter 338. Chin Mo lifted his lids and leaned back, sitting elegantly on the chair. You want to know? Let's see. As he said this, he pushed the phone in front of the youngster with a faint smile on his face. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows and looked at the screen that hadn't dimmed yet. There was a photo with 4 words: attack, receive, immediate, present. And all the comments, all of which were pitying her, the receive? Receive? Didn't the little cuties see her fierce and aggressive eyes? The Almighty was indeed aggressive, but she wasn't bad either. Fu Jiu's fingers paused. No wonder the Almighty, who didn't let her take the phone, pushed it away from her. It was all a trick. Fu Jiu couldn't enjoy the handsome photo of herself and the Almighty anymore. What attack and receive? Chin Mo looked at the depressed face of the youngster with the toast in his mouth and smiled happily. Don't talk. Fu Jiu pointed at him. Chin Mo was a big brother, so he wouldn't listen to his little brother. Your fans have good taste, especially when it comes to our positions. Brother Mo, you are exposed, I am exposed, so I am also on the offensive. Fu Jiu took the tray as she spoke, using food to make up for this defeat. That photo on Weibo had already blown Lin Feng up. He asked Yunhu along the way, did Captain really sleep with Little Spade? What method did Little Spade use to get Captain to take a photo with him? And Captain even learned to say attack and receive. Shouldn't our team be full of straight men? Even if others are gay, Captain should be the representative of millions of straight men. You mean, can you be gay? Yunhu showed his room card and walked into the magnificent hall. Lin Feng shook his head immediately. Then shut up and take the food. Yunhu took a tray. Lin Feng fixed his eyes on it and strode towards Fu Jiu's table. He was first shocked by the number of empty plates on the table, and then he said to Chin Mo seriously, Captain, I came to find Little Spade to eat together. Little Spade, let's see what else you want to eat. If he wanted to ask questions, he had to drag him away alone. Fu Jiu wouldn't refuse good food, so she smiled and was about to get up. Chin Mo's voice was calm. He has already eaten 7 plates, 1 toast and 3 glasses of juice. Are you sure you want him to continue eating? These words were directed at Lin Feng. When those deep eyes looked at him again, there was a hint of pressure. Lin Feng immediately loosened his grip. Qin Mo raised the porcelain cup and took a sip of iced Americano. The chill immediately dissipated quite a bit. Since he couldn't pull them apart, Lin Feng could only beat around the bush. After all, the two main characters in the photo were there. Little Spade, how did you sleep last night? Where's classmate Feng? Why don't I see him? That's right, don't know that Captain and the others are already in the same room. However, Fu Jiu replied to this question very meaningfully. She said in an evil tone, take a guess. Guess your sister? Was Little Spade his biological brother? If you're my brother, then tell me the truth. Lin Feng turned his face and kept communicating with Fu Jiu with his eyes. Fu Jiu held a piece of chewing gum in her mouth, and a bubble came out as she chewed. She looked so handsome, but she was asking for a beating. However, the captain didn't care about this guy. Chapter 339. Attack! Qin Mo raised his eyebrows and laughed. He said coldly, it's the same whether you wear clothes or not. That face is too beautiful, so it'll be even worse if you take it off. Don't even think about it. Lin Feng. 10,000 points of critical hit. Fu Jiu couldn't help but laugh. Lin Feng felt that it wasn't suitable for him to stay here in this situation. Yun Hu stood behind him, dragging 2 plates. The whole team has pictures of you with your shirt off. How can you say that you are the attack? Fu Jiu was interested. Let me see. Lin Feng pulled Yun Hu over and said seriously, Little Spade, I have something to discuss with your brother Yun Hu. You and Captain can continue eating. How could he pull Yun Hu with his strength? Yun Hu could knock him down with one hand. But Yun Hu liked to tease him, so he let Lin Feng pull him away. Fu Jiu saw that there was meat on the tray, and her eyes lit up. Unfortunately, the Almighty moved faster than her. He moved his fork and said calmly, let me help you destroy such a sinful thing. You want to see pictures of people with their shirts off? Heh, my brother's interests are really different. Actually, I only want to see Brother Mo's. Fu Jiu smiled and blinked her left eye. So, Brother Mo, you can give me your phone and let me see it again. Qin Mo was not moved at all. Your eyes are red, and you still want to take your phone? If you want to see it so much, I'll take it off in my room. Fu Jiu paused slowly. The Almighty was so cunning and not easy to deal with. And she didn't know if it was because she always flirted with him, but he was getting better at avoiding flirting. Fu Jiu was still a little depressed. Yun Hu and Lin Feng came with other team members. Because today was the last day of training, everyone was wearing a very handsome combat uniform. This attracted a lot of attention from the diners. They could vaguely hear people talking in Japanese. Are they esports players? It seems so. Every one of them looks very imposing. Unfortunately, they are not from Tokyo. There is a handsome young man over there, like a character from a manga. Esports was very popular in Tokyo. Even Lin Feng, a big man, felt that he was being watched. However, today, Secretary Liang really wasn't in the mood to replace Manager Feng and lead the Supreme Alliance to the training. He was standing at the entrance of the hotel restaurant. His expression was so conflicted that he didn't look like the capable and handsome CEO's assistant that he usually was. Who could tell him what the situation was? There's President Qin, who was so cold that he could freeze people to death, and no one in Jiang City dared to take a picture of him, was now on the hot search list. There were still 2 people in the photo, and both of them were extremely handsome. But Secretary Liang really couldn't appreciate that handsomeness. First, he made an international call to someone he knew, and with great difficulty, he suppressed the popularity on Weibo. In the end, Madam had called him. To call him at this time, it would be strange if Manager Feng did not feel conflicted. The waiter at the side couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped forward politely and asked, Sir, is there anything we can help you with? At first, the waiter spoke in Dongjing dialect. Seeing that Secretary Liang was still frowning, he repeated it in English. Only then did Secretary Liang realize that there were still people around. He immediately smiled warmly. Thank you, But no, it's a phone call. As he spoke, Secretary Liang took a step and walked towards a quiet place. Chapter 340. Hello, madam. Secretary Liang had mixed feelings when he said the first sentence. If madam asked him about the photo, how would he answer? Could it be that he felt something was wrong with CEO Qin recently? Or maybe it was nothing. It was just that the people in the same team had a good relationship. What the F***CKZO Qin had been alone since he was a kid. Except for those in the compound, who else had he been close to? When he was in high school, he had a group of people following him. At that time, CEO Qin didn't look like a third-generation soldier. He looked like the boss of the school. Now that he was in college, he looked like a CEO. There were many people who admired CEO Qin, but the one who was especially close to him was Fujio. However, he could not rule out the possibility that it was a bond between brothers. He had to be honest. Secretary Liang calmed himself down and asked in a professional tone, "Madam, what can I do for you?" The beauty on the other side of the phone was a little depressed. "Liang. I'm here. My son found you." Secretary Liang wanted to say that CEO Qin found me long ago, but madam only found out now. His eyes were full of tears. "Why didn't you tell me that Mo was talking to a boy? You made me so excited." Secretary Liang's heart skipped a beat. "You knew?" "Yes, I knew." The beauty sighed. "I told you, it's impossible for him to change. Help me keep an eye on him. See if there are any other girls in front of him. If there aren't any, create an opportunity for him to meet them." Secretary Liang wanted to say that he had changed, but no, as the CEO's assistant, he couldn't just guess. "Yes, madam. I have arranged it, but CEO Qin is not happy. For example, during this special training in Tokyo, he felt like he was about to be abandoned. Because of the Cali team, CEO Qin looked at him with coldness. Secretary Liang knew that was a warning. "You can't go too far." The beauty thought about it and said, "Then you can pay attention to who he is close to. Guys are fine too, but don't let him be too cold." Secretary Liang opened his mouth. "Guys are fine too? Brothers, of course. Mo can't sleep alone, so I heard that he found a good friend to keep him company." After saying that, the beauty bit her teeth. "It doesn't seem like something he would do. It's weird." Secretary Liang. "So, the president really slept with young Master Gio last night. Those photos weren't taken randomly, right? Why did he feel even more exhausted?" "All right, I'm going to join the crew. Let's keep up the catchphrase." Secretary Liang listened to the sound of the phone being hung up. What the hell was the slogan? Madam asked him to do this, and he couldn't refuse. "It's not that I can't refuse, madam." But he couldn't refuse his boss. When Secretary Liang received this order, he would first report it to his boss. The boss smiled faintly and said, "That's good. You can train your undercover skills. By the way, your CEO Qin's anti-reconnaissance skills are very good. But you have to understand a mother's concern for her son. In other words, my son will definitely find you, so you have to go too." Secretary Liang took a deep breath. He couldn't bear to look back on the past. He had to think carefully about how he was going to work from now on. First of all, Chapter 341. Because of the photo, the atmosphere among the Supreme Alliance members was a bit strange. Especially Feng Shang, his eyes were full of grievance. He wanted to sue the captain, but didn't want to see the lawsuit. Who hasn't seen the fighting video of Sakura Stream Squad? Qin Mo was the one who broke the atmosphere. Counting on Fujio? The young man only knew how to smile evilly, which made people think of elegance. Although Yin Wuyao was no longer in this circle, he was a professional, so he would pay attention to this aspect. The ones who hadn't seen it were Shui Yaoyao, Feng Shang, and Fujio. Everyone watch it again. Lin Feng is responsible for explaining. Qin Mo said and stood up. "Let's go to the hotel conference hall." Such a hotel usually had a conference hall, but it was expensive. But since Secretary Liang was here, this kind of thing would definitely be arranged properly. All the members sat on both sides of the conference room, which was a very cool scene that could only be seen in movies. Yun, who skillfully turned on the computer, then plugged in the USB drive, and the picture was projected on the big screen in the conference room. The captain of Sakura Stream's squad, Yamaguchi. He used to fight with the captain, and he is best at close combat. According to the style of Sakura Stream squad, he must be training urgently now. There are two other members. I am familiar with Lin Feng. This ranking match is 5v5, and Lin Feng and I will deal with these two. The most worth mentioning is him, Shu Ji. Everyone looked at the photo, and their eyes became sharp. It's him. Yes, it's the person we met in the training base yesterday. Yun, whose expression didn't change at all. He just joined Sakura Stream Squad this year, but he has already become an official member. The reason why Sakura Stream Squad is so murderous this time is because of him. This person is best at sneak attacks, and his character is full of hostility when he operates it. He is famous for being bloodthirsty, so in this team competition, we need to be wary of him jumping out of the grass and suddenly attacking us. Someone couldn't help saying, his hand speed shouldn't be as fast as Little Spade. The hero is not just about hand speed. Little Spade can indeed avoid his sneak attacks, but our speed is not as fast as him. This is 5v5 ranking. Yun, who put down the pen and reminded everyone of the most critical point. Here is the video of Shuji's sneak attack. Everyone watch it. Time is tight, and this is all we can collect. With that, Yun, who tapped open the video. The members of the Supreme Alliance watched helplessly as the two people who were attacking on the main road were suddenly frozen in place by a red shadow that jumped up from behind. Then the red shadow moved back and forth 3 times, completing a double kill in an instant. Surprisingly, he was unscathed. Such a person would be very troublesome to deal with, whether it was attacking or defending a city. The Supreme Alliance members all looked at each other. They saw the same thing in each other's eyes. The conference room suddenly fell silent. There was only one thought in everyone's mind, and that was how they would deal with this person if they encountered him. Everyone knew that the friendly match the next day would be no less difficult than the national competition. Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang were even more shocked. As two pure newbies, they finally felt what really sports was. Joining the Supreme Alliance was just the beginning. Chapter 342. It didn't matter, they would definitely win. They still had Spade Z. Thinking of this, Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang looked at Fujio together. Fujio didn't laugh this time. She just looked at the video, thinking about something. At this time, Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang didn't know that in order to protect Fujio's eyes, Chinamo didn't plan to let Fujio play. After watching the video of Sakura Stream's game, the atmosphere of the whole team changed. It was a kind of change in the eyes, which could make people immerse in it unconsciously. When everyone started training, it was already too late. Fujio's hands were a little itchy. In the beginning, she just sat there with a lollipop in her mouth. Later, her eyes began to involuntarily fall on the bright screen. Chinamo sat far away from Fujio, put out the cigarette between his fingers, stood up, and walked to the youngster. Look up. Apply the medicine. Chinamo was indeed a good brother, even carrying eye drops with him. When Fujio applied the medicine, she couldn't help but tilt her head to look at the screen. Chinmo's fingers were still lifting the youngster's chin. Seeing him tilt his head, he didn't say anything. But Fujio opened her mouth. She blinked her stung eye, and became blind in one eye. I'd better play tomorrow. I'm afraid I can't stop that Shuji without me. His hand speed was really fast, not just fast, but most importantly, you didn't know when he would come out. In the game, hiding in the grass could make you invisible. To deal with him, in addition to fast reaction and accurate positioning, the most important thing was to understand the way of sneak attack. Fujio was a hacker. Compared with Shuji, she was better at camouflage attacks, so she could deal with what she was good at. Chinmo's voice was very calm. I'm here, don't worry. Fujio wanted to say something. Chinmo raised his eyebrows. What? You don't believe me? Hearing that, Fujio laughed. I believe you, then I'll cheer for you in the waiting area. When did it start? The two of them gradually became this close. In the beginning, they got along with each other with a smell of gunpowder. But now they both knew what each other was like. The trust of the strong didn't need to be said much. But Fujio still felt a little regret. I thought I could fight with you, brother Emma. What a pity. When he said this, the young man was smiling. Chin Emo kept the eye drops and stuffed them into his trouser pocket. His other hand ruffled Fujio's silver hair. Don't say, oh, it'll be more believable. This guy's words were so annoying. How did he manage to endure it? Was it because he was good-looking? Fujio was indeed good-looking. She lifted her hand and placed it on Chin Mo's shoulder. Brother Emo, look at my serious eyes. I only saw the redness. Chin Emo frowned. It's not good to stay indoors all the time. I'll bring you out for a walk. Our goal is the National League. If your eyes are still like this, they will be affected. Fujio really couldn't stay here. It hurt her eyes to look at the computer screen all the time. After hearing Chin Mo's words, Fujio understood the gravity of the situation. She put on a plush black coat and followed Chin Mo out. Secretary Liang didn't dare to follow anymore. The outdoor air in Tokyo was very fresh. In addition, because it was too cold, snow had already started to fall. Everything looked very beautiful. Chapter 343. But in the next second, Fujio, who was about to walk forward, paused. The afternoon light shone on her body warmly. People were walking to and fro on the business street, and some were looking up. Some were exclaiming, some were laughing, and some were talking. Gosh, that must be our number one. The number one team in the whole server, my favorite Hoshino, he's so handsome. I even went to buy Hoshino's merchandise yesterday. I love him so much that I couldn't get a lot of things. Did you see that smile just now? My heart was trembling. That person was asking the girl standing next to Fujio. Then he turned around and saw a silver-haired handsome young man who was no less handsome than Hoshino. He was stunned. Fujio's eyes fell on the large LED screen on the business street. She was very familiar with that person. So familiar that she stopped abruptly. Of course, Chin Emo noticed that the young man didn't keep up. He turned around and saw that the young man was lifting his chin with his left hand in his pocket. His eyes were full of tenderness as he watched the scene on the screen. Tenderness? Not completely. There were too many other emotions. What kind of person could make someone stare at him like that? Chin Emo also saw that scene. Hoshino, an esports player who had emerged in the past 2 years, was extremely popular in Tokyo. The reason why he was liked by so many people was not only because of his achievements, but also because of his face, which was comparable to that of a movie star. Do you know him? This was Chin Mo's first question. Fujio turned her head, and her silver hair fell down. How could that be? I just think he's handsome. Really? Chin Mo didn't continue this topic. Fujio laughed. Actually, I know him, but he doesn't know me. I've watched his games, and the scene is good. Chin Mo looked at the young man again, and his voice was very calm. Got it. The Almighty said that he got it, but it seemed that he didn't believe her words. Fujio also knew that her behavior was a bit obvious. It was only when Hoshino appeared that she stopped. But she didn't plan to do anything. In life, one had to look forward. Hoshino should be living a happy life now. That was enough to know. She didn't touch any of her bank accounts and bank cards because she wanted to cover up her identity. Once the matter here was settled, he would go and deal with the others. However, Fujio didn't know that in the eyes of others, she had a different expression. Chin Mo looked at the youngster without any expression on his face. His fingers paused for a moment, and his long and narrow eyes seemed to have lost some of the warmth they should have. In the end, because they had walked too far, they had to take a bus back. Because of the roads, there was only public transportation. The Tokyo tram was heated and very clean. But as long as it was public transportation, there would be a lot of people. The scenery outside the car window kept changing. Fujio felt a little squeezed. Chin Mo was even more unsuited for such an environment. Fujio wondered if this was the Almighty's first time taking public transportation. She had been staring at that handsome and noble side profile for too long. An uncle came up and was about to bump into Fujio. Chapter 344. Fujio pressed her head against it. It smelled a lot better in an instant, although the trams in Tokyo were clean. But there were many people, so it still smelled good. Now it was gone. Fujio touched her nose and lifted her head. She found out that she and the Almighty were in such a position that she wanted to kiss him. Seriously, don't blame her for thinking too much. She had been teased by the Almighty recently. If Chin-emo knew what the young man was thinking, he would have laughed coldly. Who was teasing whom? There were people behind and people in front. Chin-emo was like a dead end. Fujio didn't move back. She pressed her head against Chin-mo's. Finally, she found it interesting, so she used her fluffy head to push against him. In such an environment, the Almighty couldn't do anything to her. Chin-emo really couldn't do anything to the young man. He held the young man's back with one hand and grabbed the bracelet on the tram with the other. His face was extremely handsome. Who knew that the guy in his arms would be so naughty? After Fujio bumped into him, she clearly heard the Almighty's sigh. She was amused and continued to push. Chin-emo lowered his eyes and looked at the head that was still trying hard in his arms. The little silver swirl on the top of her head made her look especially cute. He resisted the urge to throw the young man out of the tram like trash. He lowered his voice and said in a tone that sounded like an older brother educating his younger brother, "You've had enough, haven't you?" Fujio smiled. She pressed against him and stopped. After being teased by the young man, Chin-mo's inexplicable discomfort dissipated a lot. Even the corners of his mouth lifted a little. He was a little crazy, because the tram was too crowded. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with their current posture. It was just that. Fujio's head was slightly below Chin-mo's shoulder. The silver-haired young man lowered his eyes, and the man looked like he was abstinent and domineering. Someone wanted to take a picture of this scene. However, at the next stop, the two got off. Chin-emo walked out first. It was a street with good air, but without that fluffy head in front of his chest, he felt a little uncomfortable. But even so, Chin-emo didn't forget the young man's gaze when he stood under the building and looked up at the screen. They should know each other. It was impossible not to know from that gaze. But according to the information he got, the young man didn't have any interaction with Hoshino. That's right. Chin-emo had investigated Fujio. At the very beginning. Just how early was it? As early as the first time Coco pointed at the computer and showed him a beautiful character in the game. Spade Z. The letter Z at the end successfully caught his attention. Z0. The technique was very similar, and it matched with his understanding of Z back then. His suspicions grew even stronger when he found out that Spade Z was capable of cyber attacks. But when he found out that Spade Z was Fujio, that layer of suspicion completely faded away. Even though he did not know what Zero looked like, he was sure it was a woman. Chin-emo tilted his head and glanced at the youngster beside him. And Fujio, the rich playboy who used to pester him to be his sugar daddy, was unlikely to be Zero. But Chin-emo didn't let go of any possibility. He sent someone to investigate where Fujio was on the day of the attack at the 5th Avenue 3 years ago. Chapter 345. Fujio saw that Chin-emo was looking at her and immediately smiled evilly. Then she felt her inflamed eyes itch, so she raised her hand to rub them. Chin-emo was one step faster than the youngster. He grabbed her wrist, and his side profile was handsome. "Don't touch, there are many germs on your hand." Fujio felt that this kind of minor illness was harder to treat than a broken arm. She just needed to reattach the broken arm. Something like eye inflammation really needed time. Feeling that the youngster couldn't bear it, Chin-emo simply took the youngster back to the hotel. That posture made Manager Fong, who had just arrived in Tokyo, stunned. He couldn't figure out the situation. However, Manager Fong was the smartest not to ask what he shouldn't ask. Before the official battle, with the return of Manager Fong, the Supreme Alliance, who had been depressed all afternoon, finally felt a little more at ease. The next day, the snow stopped, and the sky was blue and beautiful. The friendly match was held at the training base yesterday. Since it was a friendly match, of course, the media wouldn't be informed. But some people in Tokyo would always know about it through some grapevine. There were 1 or 2 esports reporters who came. Of course, Their focus was on Sakura Stream, not a team that didn't even enter the top 4 in Huaxia. In fact, there is no suspense at all in this match. One of the reporters adjusted his camera, feeling a little bored. The opponent will definitely be suppressed by Sakura Stream and can't even move. Another reporter yawned. You can't say that. There is still something to watch in this match, such as Shuji's performance. My boss told me to write more. Hearing their words, another Tokyo esports fan who came to watch the match shook his head in disagreement. Reporters these days, they just spout nonsense without investigating clearly. Although he was from Tokyo, he wasn't a fan of Sakura Stream. It was Chin Mo of the Supreme Alliance. Last year, the Supreme Alliance didn't enter the top 4 completely because Almighty Chin didn't participate. In this match, it was hard to say who would win. They are coming. The two reporters suddenly became spirited, and their eyes also shook with excitement. Snap, snap, snap. 3 consecutive shots were taken at Sakura Stream team who entered the field. Sakura Stream team's uniform was in line with the local aesthetic of Tokyo. On the back of the pure white shirt, there was a logo and blooming cherry blossoms. The tallest among them was their captain, Yamaguchi. His height didn't look like someone who played esports, but more like someone who played basketball. Following closely behind was Shuji, who was the most popular candidate. He had a red bandage on his forehead, making his handsome face look even more devilish and murderous. As soon as the Sakura Stream people came in, the others who came to watch the battle also stood up. The arena wasn't big, but it could accommodate dozens of people. There were still a lot of Sakura Stream fans, and that side was full of spectators. In contrast, the audience on the opposite side of Sakura Stream School was calm and somewhat desolate. In Tokyo, it was not uncommon for people to fly from one city to another for their favorite esports players. From this, it could be seen that the other party's strength was nothing much. He didn't even have a die-hard fan. However, they did not know. The reason why there was no one here was because Supreme Alliance had always done things this way. In Manager Feng's words, every time their almighty Chin showed his face, he had to pay by the second. How could he let anyone come in to watch and film? Chapter 346. The closer it was to the national competition, the more secretive their tactics were, the better it was for them. So Manager Feng simply hid the Supreme Alliance's movements. Even though the whole nation knew that the Supreme Alliance was in Tokyo, they didn't know where they were playing. TSK, so miserable. That reporter couldn't help but shake his head again. He thought it was a good topic, so he took a picture of the audience with only 1 or 2 people. Only by comparison can we show the strength of our Tokyo. Just as he was saying this, he heard a noise from the opposite side. Under the light and shadow, 13 people walked out neatly. Each of them was wearing the same uniform, a dark black coat with a circle of pure white fox fur, similar to a cloak, which made them look like knights that only appeared in comics. Which team's uniform looked like this? Wasn't it too extravagant? Extravagant? Was money a problem for the Supreme Alliance? Of course not. Manager Feng smiled like a fox, the kind that hid a knife in his smile. Chin Mo took the lead, Fujio stood on his left, and Yun who stood on his right. Everyone had their own unique style, which immediately formed a handsome and threatening scenery. Especially Fujio's silver hair, which was simply eye-catching, not to mention the lollipop in her thin lips. The two reporters on the opposite side didn't expect that the people of this team would have such an aura. Especially the one who took the lead, so noble and domineering, with an indescribable sense of shock. So handsome. Is this the weak team from Huaxia? They look pretty good. Maybe it's just their good-looking faces. But they are too good-looking. People like them can be stars. No matter how good-looking they are, they will be destroyed today. Boys and girls had different ways of thinking. In the esports arena, what was the use of being good-looking? Good skills were the real handsome ones. Shuji, who was standing over there, also saw Fujio. He immediately turned his head, gave her a thumbs up, and then slowly fell down. This action of his caused a commotion among the audience. Sakura Stream. Victory! Sakura Stream, victory! Amidst the loud cheers, Fujio looked at his actions. He had one hand in his pocket, and his handsome face didn't look annoyed. Instead, the corners of his mouth curled up a little, looking like he didn't care at all. The youth's arrogant attitude was even more infuriating. Shuji narrowed his eyes, pointed at Fujio, and said to Yamaguchi, "Captain, I'll keep an eye on him." Yamaguchi didn't know about the conflict between them yesterday, so he was a little surprised by Shuji's request. "Okay, but remember, the person we're going to deal with this time is Chinemo." "Chinemo? Isn't it the one with the hand injury?" Shuji didn't take it seriously. "I'll leave him to you, Captain. I'll kill them after I'm done with that guy." Yamaguchi frowned. "Shuji, Supreme Alliance is different from the teams we met before. Don't underestimate them." Chapter 347. Shuji seems to be fiercer than usual today. This is going to be interesting. When Shuji fights, even 4 people can't stop him. Is Shuji going to go on a killing spree? I'm looking forward to it. The passion of the fans was irresistible. In the midst of such cheers, Manager Feng shook hands with the manager of the other team with the same smile. "Shall we start?" The manager of Sakura Stream Team wanted to say a few more words to show off their achievements, or at least to finish the small talk. But after hearing Feng Yi's words, he swallowed his words to show his generosity. "Let's start." It was not an official competition, so there were no 1v1 or duo matches. There was only a 5v5 siege match. But even if it was a friendly match, it still followed the international esports rules. In the wild game of Hero, everyone could die an unlimited number of times and come back to the city to be resurrected. But in a real esports competition, everyone could only die 3 times. After the 3rd time, they had to leave the computer. Obviously, the focus of the so-called siege matches was to attack the city. As long as the opponent's city was destroyed, they would win. This was also the difference between Hero and other games, as it paid great attention to the cooperation of the team. Shuji couldn't sit still anymore. He put on the black wristband and stood up. His eyes were fixed on Fujio. But Fujio just laughed and leaned back with a lollipop in her mouth, looking really handsome and annoying. According to Shuji's temper, he got angry immediately. "Little Spade, what are you doing? Why are you staring at him?" Lin Feng wanted to make fun of her before going on stage. Unexpectedly, Fujio said seriously, "This guy is impetuous, so provoking him will help us. If you want to provoke him, don't do it here. Let's go on stage." Lin Feng was about to pull Fujio up. But at this time, Chinmo's calm voice came over. "He won't go on stage." "What?" Not only Lin Feng, but also Yin Weiyao, who was next to him, was shocked. "Little Captain won't go on stage? Little Captain is so good at fighting he won't go on stage? Are you kidding me?" His eyes are inflamed, so he'd better not play games for 3 days. Chinmo's face was still as elegant as ever. However, that invisible pressure never disappeared. Lin Feng and Yin Weiyao couldn't help but worry. If Spade Z wasn't there, their attack Yun, who was calm. "Captain, who's going to fight?" "You, me, Lin Feng, Yin Weiyao." Chinemo said, "Shui Yao Yao." Shui Yao Yao was stunned. Could she do it? There were so many Supreme Alliance members here. She really didn't expect the Almighty to choose her. Chinemo didn't say anything. She reached out her hand and touched Shui Yao Yao's head. "You're good at healing, so you'll be in charge of supporting the offense. Run back and forth in the wilderness and heal whoever you see dying. Don't worry, it'll be fine. With Brother Mo here, you have to believe that Almighty Qin chose you because he has faith in you." The corner of Lin Feng's mouth would twitch every time the youth said, "Oh." Qin Mo watched the youngster's actions. His eyes turned cold, but he didn't say anything. After the commentator and the referee were in position, Qin Mo stood up indifferently, tilted his handsome chin, and bit the zipper of his jacket with his thin lips. He took off the jacket with his right hand and threw it to Fujio. "Let's go." Chapter 348. Baby Feng was left behind. And before Almighty Qin left, he gave him a very important task. That was to keep an eye on his idol and not let that guy rub his eyes all the time. This was Almighty Qin's smoothness, but Feng Shang felt that this task was quite difficult, especially when he couldn't control his idol at all. Idol, Almighty Qin said not to let you rub your eyes. The Almighty is in the competition and can't see here. If you don't say anything, who will know? In fact, Fu Jiu wanted to rub her eyes even more at this moment. It wasn't that she didn't believe in the Almighty's strength. She was worried about the Almighty's hand. But, if the Almighty lost today, she would find a chance to kill Shuji more than 10 times. Thinking of this, Fu Jiu was about to raise her hand again. Qin Emo happened to turn his head, and his deep eyes were full of meaning. This was why it was hard to deal with a psychic. Whatever she did, he would know in advance. Fu Jiu had no choice. She put her hand down, smiled, and grabbed the phone that Baby Feng was keeping for the Almighty. Feng Shang felt that he really couldn't deal with his idol, the bandit. Could he find someone else to watch him? Fu Jiu took the phone and sent a WeChat message to Qin Mo. Brother Mo, are you going to look back to see if I'm rubbing my eyes during the competition? Qin Mo paused, took out the phone from his pocket, and then tilted his head to type. If you don't want me to look back, be a good boy. Now, give back the phone you took from Feng Shang. Seeing the Almighty looking at her, Fu Jiu threw the phone at Feng Shang with a lollipop in her mouth and laughed. I told you not to give it to me. Why are you so disobedient? Feng Shang, who was the one who came up to grab it? Who was it? The people of Sakura Stream also noticed that Fu Jiu didn't come down. Shuji's eyes suddenly changed, and he was very angry. What do you mean? He spoke in Tokyo dialect. But this didn't affect Manager Feng's acceptance. Oh, this is our battle lineup today. Little Spade won't participate. Won't participate? Shuji's hands were almost broken. He had prepared for a long time, but the other side told him that he wouldn't participate. Let him come down. Shuji gritted his teeth, his face fierce. After listening to his words, the fans in the audience began to look at each other. What's going on? I don't know, Shuji seems very unhappy. Did that team do something wrong? Taking advantage of the wind, Shuji sneered, your unknown team, without him, are you sure you can beat me? Let me tell you, I want to compete with him. Tell him to come down. Yun, who understood Dongjing dialect. After hearing his words, he suddenly turned around, his aura extremely cold. Yamaguchi couldn't help reprimanding. Shuji. Shut up. Am I wrong? Shuji tilted his head. I know Captain is afraid of that Chinemo. He hasn't played in the professional league for a year. How strong can he be? I'm giving Supreme Alliance a chance by sending that person out. Upon hearing this, Fu Jiu's beautiful eyes narrowed. She held onto the railing with one hand and jumped down from the audience. Her black coat was lifted up, and her cool pose drew gasps from the audience. Chapter 349. Under everyone's gaze. That handsome young man, who looked like a vampire aristocrat, walked up to Shuji with his hands in his pocket. He was so bloodthirsty and cold, like an avenger coming out of the darkness. That Chinemo? Fu Jiu tilted her head, and her eyes were cold. How dare you call my brother that? Shuji wasn't annoyed, but felt his blood boiling. It's hot, isn't it? If it's hot, do it yourself. Do it myself. Fu Jiu paused and curled up her lips. I won't. To be honest, I've met a lot of people like you. Why should I compete with you just because you want me to? Is the Sakura Stream team a bandit, forcing others to compete? Feng Shang. Idol, believe me, no one looks more like a bandit than you right now. Fu Jiu said this in a Tokyo accent, and the crowd burst into an uproar. The opponent's agent hurried over and said, No, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Can't you guys just shut up and compete properly? Fu Jiu was a very protective person, and in her mind, the Almighty was the only one who had made her suffer. If the opponent said bad things about the Almighty, it would be like asking for death. Chinemo didn't expect that the young man would have such a big reaction. Although the timing wasn't right. But looking at the young man's fierce look, he was in a good mood for no reason. He walked over and rubbed the young man's head. Remember, don't rub your eyes. Fu Jiu, how did the Almighty do it? He didn't forget to warn her at this time. Shuji was so angry that his chest was churning. Now there was only one thought in his mind, and that was to destroy the opponent and make the young man regret what he said just now. Thinking of this, he turned his head and was the first to sit in front of the computer. He pulled his fingers and put on the pure black headphones. The agent finally let out a sigh of relief. After all, he couldn't control Shuji. The teammates of Sakura Stream Team didn't say anything. They knew what kind of player Shuji was. The opponent thought that Shuji was impatient and wanted to irritate him, but they didn't know that the angrier he was, the more brutal he would be when he killed someone. Compared to Shuji's murderous look, Almighty Chin was casual and noble. His slender fingers slid over the headphones, and he held the mouse in a very beautiful gesture. It made people feel like he wasn't holding a mouse, but a chess piece. In front of him was a chessboard. The young master was like jade. He didn't expect to see such inviolable people in modern times. This was the first thought that came to the minds of the audience. His second thought was, of course, to let Shuji kill them all as soon as possible. However, it was different from the people here. Among the two Supreme Alliance fans, one of them already felt like his blood was about to boil. 1 year. For a whole year, Almighty Chin hadn't played in a professional league like this. Although it was just a friendly match, only those who had played the game knew how exciting it was to be able to see it live. The game's music started playing. The scene officially entered. It was synchronized to the big screen in the arena. He's here. The two reporters raised their cameras. Even the commentators did not know why, but this time, they felt nervous like never before. Not to mention Shui Yao Yao, who was sitting in front of the computer. She only felt that her palms were sweating. But her eyes were very firm. This was the first battle. This was the first battle she would prove herself in. Attack! Chin Emo said these words lightly, but with a different kind of power. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.